N-am înțeles.
Nu, e terrible. Nu. Chiuveta mea este terrible. Adică...
That was developed by a commission, possibly.
Eu, uite, îți vorbesc în engleză. That's fucking terrible. Ok.
Putem să vorbim și în română.
Păi nu, da, n-ai zis că facem...
Facem pentru... Da.
Da.
What? Whoever doesn't understand Romanian, fuck off.
Am făcut așa când... Las că... Ok. Adin, good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, wherever you are and you still have the boredom to watch this show and YouTube is nice enough to deliver it into your feeds. Welcome again to the Freedom Alternative Interviews and welcome to my distinguished guest, Mr. Miguel Gomez. Welcome to my show, Miguel.
Thank you very much.
You've been to this show only once before, right after Trump's election, but it was on the Romanian language channel.
Yeah, in the Romanian language channel.
Yeah. Do you remember the predictions you made then?
I have a very, very short-term memory.
I did review that video and most of the things turned out to be right. You said Trump is not exactly a conservative, but he won't be nowhere near as bad as most conservatives thought he would be.
Yes.
It turned out to be true. You said the wall is going to take a lot longer than 1 year. That turned out to be true.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but and the third, you said that the deep state will be much more dangerous than even the most the most dire predictions that were made at the time. That turned out to be true.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, we're not here to talk about Mr. Trump.
We could.
Although we could. Actually,
yeah, at some point.
Yeah, whatever. You approached me for this video because I've asked you before to show up on my channel, on this channel, and you refused. And now you approached me because I made that series of 10 things that suck and 10 things that rock about the United States.
About the United States, yeah.
So what is the context of that? Because the English language audience of this channel probably doesn't know.
Well, maybe one or two of them will know.
No.
But I think that... we can elaborate on a couple of things, especially from the perspective of a person who has lived 20 years of his life in the United States. I think, for example, you considered it a disadvantage, I think, if I recall correctly, that it was just such a big amount of distance.
No, I said it's both a
blessing and a curse at the same time, yeah. And I think...
The blessing is that you can do whatever the fuck you want because there's always room for more.
Yeah.
And the cursing is that it's just too far away. Everything is just so far away.
I think one of our biggest problems was that our infrastructure in the 20s and 30s was very public transport centric. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of trams, a lot of streetcars, a lot of trolleys, buses. Electricity started to become a thing. So... they started experimenting with these ideas. And then all of a sudden, the culture just started embracing automobiles a lot more because it represented this certain instinct of freedom that Americans have. They just want the freedom to travel at their own leisure. Mm-hmm. And after that started developing, all these infrastructure started getting torn down. Some of them are still there, but there's nothing traveling on them. I think you've seen that when you were traveling around the country. Mm-hmm. And... one of the things that I consider kind of tragic is the fact that we've abandoned this idea of being able to allow public transportation to develop, especially because there were a lot of private companies developing these things. It wasn't very public per se. And let me just light this cigarette. Okay. Cigarette first, conversations later.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So anyway, the fact that we depend so much on automobiles now is kind of holding us back a little bit because our rail infrastructure also suffers. At the same time, it's very nice to be able to travel with your car anywhere you want. And the roads are pretty wide. So it's nice that you don't have to, like fit your car in these tiny little roads like you do in Europe.
Yes, that's probably the biggest difference,
Yeah,
the
but
wideness of the roads. But then again, we in Europe did not have the opportunity to get
to start from scratch.
Yeah, to get a huge continent that is completely undeveloped, and you can just, we need a wider road. We're just going to build a wider road. Now in Europe, you can't do that because there's always
historical buildings,
some 15th
like
century building on the side of the road, and you can't just tear it apart. Well, you can, but since this is the continent made of history rather than risk, yeah.
Well, it's also quite nice to have these city centers that are very quaint over here. That's something kind of rare in the United States. Something that I'm a little bit of critical of is the fact that we have so much brutalist architecture in our country.
That came out as a surprise for a portion of my audience, me criticizing the architecture in such harsh terms. But other than Alexandria, Virginia, which is a very quaint little city, or at least the old town, most of the rest is, yes, it is pretty brutalist, especially in the big cities. In the smaller towns, you still can find some older houses, but in the big cities, it's very brutalistic.
Yeah, I was watching a movie with my wife yesterday, and it was filmed in New York. We were watching Joker, actually, and it was from New York. New York is Gotham, basically, and she was saying, "God, that's such a terrible place to live because it's just full of these really tall, brutalist buildings all over the place."
Yeah, and those creepy alleys, man.
Yeah, we have some of those over here in Romania too, but it's not quite as often.
Yeah, but you can quote all 5 of them or all 10 of them in the whole country, because there's usually no more than one per city. But for instance, in Chicago, you can find like a couple of dozen of those on a quarter.
Yeah, there are many places in the USA where I feel safer in Ferentari than over there. Actually, Ferentari is actually quite nice.
Ferentari has gotten pretty well.
Just so that the audience here, the English-speaking audience watching this, can be a little bit more informed. Ferentari is actually a really famous neighborhood in Bucharest, and it's known for gang violence, for a lot of basically our Brooklyn, our Bronx, and
or at least it used to be, because nowadays the gangsters they no longer fight with each other. They prefer to negotiate in shekels, and the most violent ones are still rotting in jail. So. It has gotten pretty good. I was surprised. I went to Ferentari last time in February 2018, and I was surprised that nobody asked me the time. And there are very few people outside, and those that were, yes, they were doing shady business. But if you don't mind their business, they weren't going to mind your own, which I think is fair. I mean, given my opinion in general about illicit business, taxation is theft and all the rest. Right. Since you've been living for the last, 10, 11 years, 12 years, 11 years, I think, in Romania.
I think in September I've
turned 11.
Turned 11.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What are the 10 things that suck about Romania?
10 things. Hard to find 10 things.
I mean, the audience has heard the Romanian perspective on 10 things that suck about the USA. Let's hear the American perspective on 10 things that suck about Romania.
Well, after living here some time, I think, and I've lived in different regions of Romania. I've lived in Crișana, I've lived in Transylvania, I've lived in Muntenia as well, in Târgoviște, Oradea, Cluj, Napoca, Sibiu. Well, it's hard to say things that suck about Romania without first clarifying that a lot of these things are region specific. There's a lot of things in Romania that are very region specific. This country is basically just 3 countries put together.
Same in the USA.
Maybe even 8 countries put together.
Same in the USA. I mean,
yes.
What is specific?
I think Americans can relate to that.
What is specific to the Midwest is not specific to the Yankee Dome. What is specific to the Yankee Dome is not specific to the Deep South, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Very similar.
In the South, I've experienced this mentality of suspicion. Everybody was very suspicious of me because I was probably the only American that they've ever seen in their lives that actually knew how to speak Romanian perfectly. Well, as perfectly as an American can speak, of course. But That's something that I don't experience over here, for example, or here in Transylvania. But I have experienced it a lot in the South. This suspicion, this whole idea that I'm probably a spy or something that was...
Amerikanski.
Amerikanski spiel. Yeah, they're generally a little bit of a very, I don't know, uncomfortable attitude towards Americans. Didn't make me uncomfortable in the least because I'm a foreigner. You have to expect that as a foreigner you're going to be treated with a little bit of suspicion sometimes. It's not a big deal. But what I particularly didn't like was the mentality of... there's the saying in Romania, "Samoara capra vecinului."
The neighbor's goat
Yeah, I
should
had
die.
neighbors downstairs to me that they were very angry that I made more money. They were really angry. They were screaming in their house every time I bought something, like a new refrigerator or something. And they were really like shouting at the top of their lungs in their house because they were furious about the fact that I was living better than they did. But I was also helping my neighbors. I was also being a good neighbor, trying to be at least. But they had this burning envy that I think comes from, I guess, the communist background that they had. I don't know. I can't really comment on that because I'm not an expert on this subject, but it seems to me that a lot of people they just want to bring you down. I mean, they tried to take down one of my air conditioning units with a broomstick. You know?
I'm not surprised.
I heard banging outside, right? And I started going out the window, and I was like, "What the hell are you guys doing?" You know?
Right. Well, I don't know whether it's the communist background per se. I mean, which came first, the chicken or the salmonella? Because when the communist regime installed as the People's Republic in 48, 49, their biggest recruitment base was around Bucharest and Craiova County, Dolj County.
Yeah.
Not the rest of Oltenia, just Craiova and everything around Bucharest, including the Târgoviște area. So, I don't know, maybe that negative envy was there even before the communist regime, and the communist regime just amplified it or augmented it. So there's that. On the other hand, I did mention when I said that on the 10 things that rock about the USA, that Americans are generally more positive. Oh, you're trying out a new venture. That's awesome. Can you tell me what it is? Maybe I can try it too, or maybe I can provide good advice. Whereas in Europe, and I've seen this attitude repeated all over, not just in the Intermarium in Eastern Europe, but also in Western Europe, Europeans are like, okay, when are you getting a real job? That is to say, to be the bootlicker of a big organization, preferably the state, or if not the state, then a German multinational for sure. So, okay, the taking down the air conditioning unit, that's a bit extreme, but it's not really that far outside of the norm of Europe.
I can relate to that because I was just starting the first legs of my business about 8 years ago. And I remember that a lot of people were very puzzled that why the hell is this guy not looking at, you know, a job in a factory or something like that. What the hell, you know, fucking loser, you know? And, sorry, pardon my French, just, you know, trying to use whatever words I want. How about that? Anyway, there was this idea that you're just not going to succeed. They were all, it was such a fatalist attitude towards this kind of adventure. And I can be sincere and say that many times I have failed in this adventure, but failure is an option. It is something that will happen. You have to accept that sometimes you will fail, and you have to keep failing till you succeed. Because failure is the first step to success. That's something that these people don't understand. That if you don't have success outright, the only thing that you're missing is persistence. There's multiple ingredients to having a successful business, and one of those is persistence. You have to constantly keep trying, keep at it. And the lack of encouragement didn't bother me because, you know, I can't be bothered. I have my mother, I have my family encourages me. But, you know, I just don't give a single shit about what my neighbors have to say or anything like that. But there was this attitude that it's just, you know, and they even try to bring you down sometimes. They even take efforts to just demolish your morale. It's not quite as visible over here, though, in this part of the country. Although, yes, there's still some semblance of that, but I see that there is a certain optimism developing in Ardeal, that isn't quite as visible in more of the other, I wouldn't say less developed regions of the country, but what can I say, less westernized versions of
the former
areas
kingdom
of the country. Yeah, exactly. You can see a clear distinction between Transylvania and Wallachia and Moldova. You can see it right across the mountains is always like as if though you're in a different country.
Well, traditionally, Moldova was the place of the intellectuals. Most of the national intellectuals are from the eastern part of the country, and Transylvania was more of the workers and business and merchants, and it still is today like that. And the south was usually the warriors. It's not a surprise that Vlad the Impaler was from the south and not from the east or from Transylvania.
Yeah,
and to a certain extent, it has remained that way. For more understanding, watch out my video on the societal standard, by the way, because these things don't change. They've been the same for about 500 years, and they somehow refuse to change. Modernity refuses to seep in. Okay, what other thing? This is the first thing that sucks about Romania. Number two, drivers. I think a lot of this really blasé attitude towards common rules of decency. I'm not even talking about drivers that don't follow the law. The laws are there more as guidelines. Everybody knows that. That's how it is in Romania. I accept that wholeheartedly because I agree with it. I don't think that, we have to follow every single driving law perfectly down to the letter. Yeah, worshipping at the altar of the law.
No. But there's a lack of common decency among some drivers sometimes that it's like, you're a pedestrian, you're a pleb. Even though I'm probably earning like 8 times more than you are, but you're still considering me a fucking pleb. What the hell? I take the priority because I have the car. Especially when I'm cycling or something, I do understand disdain for cyclists.
Yes.
I can understand that because cyclists can also be assholes, to be completely sincere. But when you're a cyclist that is trying to share the road with the vehicles, trying to give them space and stuff like that, why do you drive your car at 50 kilometers an hour, just slam the fucking pedal to pass me, just so that I can, throw off my balance or something like that? Just, it's very rude. I've seen that happen a lot from people visiting from Bucharest and Sibiu. But again, it's region specific because up north, here in Sibiu, the drivers are actually very respectable. Here in Cluj, the same thing. The drivers are actually more respectable than my hometown in Miami. They are far more respectable. They are very, very well-educated and well-mannered people. Generally civilized. If you're a dick to them, they will be a dick back to you. But if you're not, they will apologize if they make a mistake. They will, even give you priority when they shouldn't, which kind of pisses me off sometimes because, for example, when I'm going at a roundabout, the inside lane has priority. But for some reason, they're giving me priority when I'm on the outside. No, don't do that. Just go ahead. It's not quite a big problem over here, but I've seen drivers coming from the south that they just tend to have absolutely no consideration for manners of anybody else. They're just in their own little protective bubble, and that bubble has to have priority. I think it comes from the culture of traffic that they have over there, because there is some really nasty traffic in the area, and I can understand, that it kind of gets to your head and it drives you nuts.
Yeah, if you've driven once or twice through Bucharest, you're gonna get the point.
you will be absolutely. Yeah, I think it would transform me into a Bucharest driver if I drove in Bucharest. I think it's just a thing of the area over there, because even in Târgoviște, the drivers are respectable. They're very respectful. It's not really even a southern thing. It's just a really big city thing. New York drivers also tend to be very disrespectful.
I was about to bring up New York because I've been to New York, and
I think it's just a big city thing in general. I don't think it's even specific to Romania, so I probably wouldn't. But I have to include it in this list because this is something that I've observed in Romania. But yeah, it's true of big cities almost everywhere, that when the cities are huge and traffic is just bumper to bumper all the time, people tend to get a little bit silly.
But then again, when it comes to drivers, the worst drivers I've met in Europe, I would have to say the Bucharest drivers come only second. The worst have to be in Belgium. I mean, those people don't know how to drive. They just don't know. It's not that they're
Wait. They are actually thinking that they're driving their car?
Yeah, that's their impression.
Sure. They have the impression. Oh, that's cute.
It's very cute indeed. And it's Belgium specific, because once you cross into the Netherlands or to Luxembourg, it's just
Netherlands
not.
actually has very respectful drivers.
Yeah.
They do have very respectful drivers.
Well, they have to put up with the
cyclists.
Hundreds of thousands of asshole cyclists. So,
Yeah, exactly. The cyclists there are the problem. I mean, there's a saying in Netherlands, you look to the left, no cyclists. Look to the right, no cyclists. You cross the street, the cyclist slams into you anyway.
Yes.
It's gonna happen. It's a problem over there. They also have they count out way too much their cyclists. But
Yes.
that's
just like we count out in Romania way too much to the drivers, to the motorists. We do.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the conversation is how to build wider roads, and I'm like, how about you drive less? That's an option too.
I never understood this in Romania, that you have to have a car, you have to go drive here. I can understand if you're constantly visiting a place that's very difficult to access. Or, for example, my brother-in-law, his village is extremely far away from any major roads. It's like backwater village. So if you're trying to visit him, you need a car. And you need a car with some good suspension in order to drive there. So I can understand that. If you have family to visit or something, and you want to have a car to be able to access them, of course. But there are people that they're just... It's this attitude that they have to get in their car and drive 3 kilometers to just around the block. Why?
Because trams and buses and metros.
You see, in America, it's different because the buses are just awful usually. And even the subways can also be a little bit inconvenient. But there's
And the geography doesn't help. I mean, usually the metro or the subway and the buses, they may go to the first or second suburb, but many of the cities have now expanded so much that the public transport authority can't even keep up with all of the new suburbs that open up. And
again, when you have a motor vehicle-centric infrastructure like the United States, I can understand getting a car. Even the poorest of the poor in the United States need a car in order to be able to get to work. Because going on the bus can take you even upwards of 2 or 3 hours to get to a destination. I remember taking the bus from college to my home, and it wasn't even that far away. It was like 30 kilometers away. Well, for me, that's not far. And it took me about an hour or an hour and a half to get home. And that can be very distressing for people.
That's slower than the regional trains in Romania.
Exactly. Whereas over here, if I want to get somewhere, I'll be there in half an hour. It doesn't matter where. I will be there in half an hour. I will, I was just going from Mehedinți, which is like near here. It's like somewhere in the periphery of the city, of the inner city. And going all the way to Julius Mall, which is like somewhere around the center. That was like about 10 kilometers, maybe?
About
15, something
maybe
like
12.
No
more than 12.
Yeah, and then I take a bus and I'm there in like 10 minutes. It's a very different kind of infrastructure.
All right, so drivers is number 2. Number 3?
Number 3, let me think. Let's talk about something about this region. Sometimes in conversation it takes fucking forever for somebody to get to their point.
Okay. Yeah.
They meander on and talk like that. I run a competitive clan in what's it again? Some video game, whatever. And one of the former staff, because yesterday he left, whatever, he couldn't take it anymore. But anyway, one of our former staff was from Brasov. I have conversations with the dude. It's fine, okay? But a lot of people just can't stand the fact that it takes forever for him to get to his point. It takes like, we have to listen to him for an hour until we understand exactly what he wants.
And we love that shit. I mean, have you taken a look at our president lately?
What was he, a ficus or?
Yes, yes. And the big shut up guy, Mailemut.
Mare tacere. Yeah, marle tăcut sau.
Mailemut.
Marlemut. Yeah. I was going to say, so yeah, that is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. That I want to have a 5-minute conversation and that's it. I don't want to stay for like 3 hours listening to your fucking life story to get the details of what I want to know.
Especially when it's a very minor point to be made. To
exactly.
With,
when it's something very dismissive.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Number 4.
Something else from this region. Come on, let me look for something. It's really hard to find bad things about Romania.
I could go with, I could suggest the state. Most of the legislation.
In some ways, it's a good thing, though. Let me elaborate on this. So, and if I'm speaking English a little bit poorly, that's because I lived here for so long. I'm sorry. Anyway, sometimes I just feel like switching to Romanian, but the state here, I can understand that it's awful when I go to the tax office, for example, and I have to wait in this long-ass line just to see like one employee whose dedicated job and getting paid 2,000 lei a month just to move one paper from one guichet, from one from one office to the one next to it. That's all.
And it's more than 2,000 lei, by the way.
It's a lot more than that. Yeah, they get these really lofty pensions and everything just for that.
Yeah, the minimum is about 4,007 after tax.
Yeah. What I consider bad about the state is the incredible amount of layers of bureaucracy that go through. And America has this problem too.
The DMV,
social services.
And the social services.
DMV is not that bad, actually. It's pretty straightforward. No, the social services branch of the United States can be completely kerfuffled, like all over. But we're talking about Romania right now. And in Romania, the public sector is enormous. It is just, I have never seen so many public employees in my life. I never have. Way too much public sector. Way too much public sector here. For a population of what, 19 million people? 19 million people, and we have like what, 3-4 million people working in the public sector? Even more than that.
It's not 4 million, but yeah, about 3. Yeah,
it's
still too much for sure.
It's way too much. It's way too much. And you got to think of the overhead, like a company usually does. You know, you think of the overhead. You think that guy, you know, all those people just work for free. They're paid salaries to do their repetitive, meandering work. And in a society where we have the technology to digitize some of these services and eliminate some of that public sector, I can't understand for the life of me why we still maintain this idea that we have to have the lady at the guichet.
Yeah, and the situation is made even worse because we've committed the mistake of joining the European Union in 2007, and as a result, all conversations are compared to the EU average. And it's true, compared to the EU average, our bureaucracy is actually too small. So as a result, every time someone, you know, who might have been watching this channel ends up somewhat big in politics and said, look, we have to cut down some of this bureaucracy. Then immediately the academe and all of the other public sector employees come up with the argument, oh, well, actually we shouldn't because we're already way beneath the EU average.
But look at, for example, well, yeah, the EU average is
not a good standard.
No, it's not a good standard because the EU average includes countries like what, France, like.
No, they're calculated on a per capita or per 100,000 inhabitants.
Yeah, even.
But nevertheless, France has a huge public sector,
and the UK also has a pretty big one. But look at, for example, if we compare ourselves to Germany, we actually have a bigger public sector than they do.
Depends on the Bundesland. It really does depend on the Bundesland.
But
that's what I've learned in this May when I spent a month in Germany.
And Austria also has quite a small public sector.
Austria, yes. Österreich has a small public sector.
You know, we don't need such a big public sector, especially because the services that we offer are not as complex as the services offered by France. And they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
They should not be as complex.
Yeah,
because
lower level of complexity is
I don't think a lot of
thing.
people in France would be lauding the country for its amazingly complex services. No, that's not something you say that's really good about France. And in Romania, that bureaucracy, can be extremely bad. But there's another silver lining to this, is that the state is so much of a clusterfuck that it's very difficult to actually pass really harmful measures. Truly harmful measures.
Or
things
at least
that can
to
really
enforce them. You can pass them, but good luck enforcing them.
There have been some harmful measures that have been passed recently, but good luck enforcing them, because everything's on such a gridlock that even and especially since antifraude, well, same thing. Antifraude has been completely demolished. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just going to be even harder to enforce these kinds of things, these tiny little micromanaging laws. And there's another thing I don't like about the bureaucracy, is that they have all the laws are just based on micromanaging people's lives and businesses, and some of them even contradict each other. That's the worst part, is that businesses have to keep, for example, if I had a meadery right now, I would have to keep 2 different sets of cleaning solutions, one for one institution, one for the other. And whenever one comes for inspection, I would have to change my my cleaning solution and put it next to the cisterns and insist that I use that one to clean them in order to pass the inspection. Even though that's something that I would never in my life use to clean a cistern because it's dangerous for my health and for the health of the clients that are buying the mead. And I do plan to open up a meadery at some point, and I started doing the research, and I realized that there's a lot of things that are contradicting, and you have to keep 2 sets of stuff for each institution that comes to inspect.
Right.
It's not to say that this is not a problem. This is a problem specific to Romania. But
of course.
The USA has the same problem. I just watched a video from PragerU recently about a guy who just wants to make his cookies, and then has the FDA comes in and says that the door has to open out from the kitchen, from the bakery or whatever. And then the U.S. Department of Agriculture says, no, the door has to open in.
Open in, yeah.
And now he keeps 2 sets of doors so that when one comes to inspect.
Well, I don't think we have regulations on doors, at least not that much. Not to that extent.
Only one.
The exterior door has to be open to the outside in order to make evacuation easier, but that's the only one that I know.
Also the door to the kitchen has to swing out.
Really? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
The door to the kitchen has to swing out in some way that prevents, I don't know what from happening. I don't remember. I don't remember the intention of the law. It doesn't even matter because it doesn't achieve its intention.
Of course.
Because laws very rarely achieve their intention.
Okay, so the bureaucracy and okay, it's number 5.
I'm going to go into a little parenthesis
Okay.
right now and say that one of the things that I don't like about the United States that you did not mention, because this is not you mentioned things from the perspective of somebody visiting.
Yes.
I'm going to mention something from the perspective of someone who lived in the United States and continues to call the United States his home, even though Romania is also my home. The movie that we just watched, right, the Joker, actually highlights this. Asylums have been very badly managed in the United States, even sometimes closing, and that's not a very good thing. We are taking away our focus from mental health. We are starting to manage things in an outpatient capacity when sometimes some people do have to be institutionalized. And it's very unfortunate because a lot of these people end up homeless due to that circumstance.
Which aggravates their mental health.
Aggravates their mental health, aggravates the situation, sometimes leads to crime.
Crime, yes.
Yeah, and this situation, I think, is one of the most important and underrated situations that we're just not addressing.
Well, since you brought up mental health, I would say that mental health is entirely neglected, because I did mention, when I mentioned that I don't like the media, where I said that it is quite literally affecting the mental health of their clients, essentially, of the spectators, because it presents an entirely different country than what it is, and it induces cognitive dissonance in people, and it induces all sorts of incipient manifestations of personality disorders into the people. So it is on all layers of the society is being neglected. And to a certain extent it's true here as well, but it just does seem a little bit more extreme in the US.
It is a bit more extreme in the US. Over here, like it or not,
People don't take the TV that seriously.
Even though mental institutions over here are kind of
They're
crappy.
pretty terrible.
They're pretty terrible.
Yeah.
They at least keep people away from society when in moments that they are a danger to themselves or others. I wouldn't say the same is possible of the United States, and I say this as somebody who, well, had issues with mental health in his previous family. I'm not going to elaborate on that for the sake of that individual. I don't want. Yeah. But anyway, yes, it's it is a problem in the United States. It is a very big one. It is a very big one. And to think, you know, these kinds of things, these discussions that we're having about gun laws and gun control wouldn't be as exigent if we had a proper mental health infrastructure. And this is one of the things where I think not only, I'm not talking necessarily about state involvement, but I think that philanthropists also should be allowed to get involved. Because a lot of things in the United States, great things that we've done, were done due to our philanthropy. Anyway, parenthesis over.
Okay, since you brought up gun laws, I would say the lack of a Second Amendment is one aspect that kind of sucks in Romania, isn't it?
Maybe. But Romania doesn't have a gun culture. It never had a gun culture.
Well,
I don't think people would know what to do with it.
I wouldn't say never. We did have in the 20s and even the 30s.
Sure, I'll give you that point, but currently, as a Romanian society stands, it doesn't really have a gun culture. People don't really care enough to really propose a Second Amendment. Maybe they will at some point. And I think it's up to, you know, once this kind of ball gets rolling, I'm not sure that the state would allow it, but at least we can have a more proper discussion about that. At this moment, as it stands, it's very difficult to start any kind of movement to try to get a Second Amendment in Romania. At least to ease the gun laws, I've heard that there are some discussions among current political parties to ease some of the gun laws. Just so you know, guys, the gun laws in Romania are actually the strictest in Europe. It is so restrictive that even the French are...
I think we've fallen, I was about to mention France, I think we've fallen second. France has just tightened them up a little bit more.
Okay.
And they surpassed us again. And likely they'll stay that way because the discussion here is to ease them up rather than tighten them up.
If an Austrian that is familiar with his gun laws would come to Romania and see our gun laws, he would say what?
Yeah, for sure.
Or somebody from the Czech Republic, or somebody from
Serbia.
From Serbia, they would be like, "Say what? You guys are insane." And these are countries that people consider very peaceful, very, you know, societies with very low crime. But in Austria, for example, about a third of people own weapons. In the Czech Republic, I would say it's somewhere around that number as well.
Now about 25-28%, almost a third, yes.
It's a, you know, gun laws...
In Serbia, half of the people?
They may not be as relaxed as the gun laws in the United States, but they're still far more relaxed than they are in Romania. I believe that,
And Serbia is just our neighbor, very similar culture, yet half of their people have guns, whereas here is what, 1%, maybe? Maybe 2%, let's be generous. Yes.
I know that Mircea Badea has a gun.
Well, is anyone in the country that doesn't know that he has a gun?
Man, that guy went on television and just started outright saying, "Hey, look, guys!" He makes a big deal about the fact that he has a gun.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the positive things about that, I would say, even though I really don't like the guy, but one of the positive things that that particular stunt has achieved is to start the discussion on normalizing guns amongst law-abiding citizens, because it did not trigger a scandal. I mean, most people were like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, because Badea, like it or not, actually started a conversation on how absurd
Yes,
the gun laws are.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was surprising coming from him because he's
a leftist.
He's a leftist and he's pessimist all the way, you know.
Yeah, and he's a legit social democrat. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the guy who actually believes in the ideals of the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah, and even he's like, guys, we're a little bit too restrictive on this. I think even some Democrats, if they came here and saw our gun laws, would be like, no, you guys are insane. So it's not about...
I mean, if Doug Jones were to come here, would say we were insane.
Yeah.
Doug Jones is an Alabama Democrat, for sure.
Yeah,
He would
he would just say that's fucking insane. Whereas, there would be a lot of Democrats that would come here and say, oh, this is like utopia.
Yeah. Well, until you take them to a shooting in Craiova and, in the middle of the street, and then, that utopia dream might be a little bit shaken.
Well, Romania in general tends to be a very low crime country. I'm actually, when I first came to Romania, I was actually quite shocked to see how safe it is here. Because everybody from outside the country was telling me, oh, this place is very unsafe. What are you doing? You're going to a very unstable country. I was very skeptical about that because I kind of did my homework a bit before coming here. But I still was surprised. I still was surprised myself that it's that safe. I expected it to be safe, but I didn't expect it to be that safe of a country. And, okay, so we said number 5 about gun laws. What should we say is number 6? Fucking tariffs. Fucking tariffs. I don't even care about the taxes in this country because they don't affect me. I don't pay them. I don't have to pay them. But yeah, even the taxes are insane. And, you read about it. Okay, you go to some website talking about Romanian taxes. They say, oh, it's just a 16% tax. No. No. That's not what people pay out of their income, okay? Half your freaking paycheck goes to the government because there's other taxes attached to that. There's a CAS tax, CASS tax, there's this social assurance tax, there's the employee assurance tax, there's a lot of taxes that come out of your income. But that doesn't affect me so much, so I'm just going to say things from my own perspective as an American that lives here. As an expat, I have to say that I have never paid more to build a computer in my life. I paid, like $2,000 to build a computer that I could have built for like $500 in the US. That is insane.
And part of that, part of it is, of course, the fault of Bucharest, but part of it is the fault of Brussels. Our import tariffs have increased like 5-fold since 2007. It used to be cheaper. I used to work in that line of business, building computers, between 2001 and 2005. And then I quit and started doing something else. And in 2009, I needed it for myself, and the prices were like 3 times higher. And I'm like, when did this happen?
Romania can't fix that, but...
Some of it can't. Some of it can be fixed.
Some of it can be fixed, yeah, to be fair. But Romania can't really work against the EU in that respect. But it can fix the fact that it's cheaper for me to build a computer in Sweden than it is for me to build it here. That is still insane. That is still beyond insane. An NVIDIA 1070, right? This graphics card that's like mid-level. Well, it used to be high-end, but now these days it's a little more mid-level. I think in the US costs like about, well, correct me guys in the comments if I'm wrong, but it costs like $250 or something like that in the US, and over here it costs like $500-600. That's just insane. I consider that one of the biggest tragedies over here, because that also is costly for businesses. Businesses that want to develop in this country have to pay an exorbitant price for the equipment that they need. It's not just, okay, we're talking about computers. I'm talking about my work. My line of work involves me using my computer. It involves me using, and of course I use it for leisure, because why the hell not? And, but when you're developing a business, let's say I want to make a meadery, right? I have to pay twice as much as an American does to buy my cisterns. I have to buy a lot to get my potassium hydroxide or whatever the hell it was. I don't remember what it was. Or sodium hydroxide. I don't remember which one. I have to buy yeast, which also has a certain tax. Well, at least the yeast is produced locally, and that is actually pretty cheap. I can't complain about that. I have to buy the finding material, and all that other stuff is imported from outside, and it costs an enormous amount of money. So I have to invest a lot more money to start a business in a country where the average salary is, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the average Romanian. The average salary here is like
3,500 lei, something like
3,500 lei.
So that's
Whereas in
700.
America, the average salary is like 12,000 something lei, and they have to invest less in their business. Romanians have to invest more. What? What kind of topsy-turvy world? How do you expect an economy to develop when you're strangling it that much? That's insane.
Yeah, and I felt this on myself as well. I mean, yeah, the tripods are produced locally, but the cameras are not. Well, actually, that one is. But these other two aren't. And as a result, for instance, this one in the US you can buy it for like $40. In Romania, I paid $250 on it.
Yeah.
The exact same camera. Same thing with some of the components of my computer. The same thing.
Yeah, the barrier to entry for businesses is insane. That's why I was saying earlier,
Even for an amateur hobby like this channel.
we need another like 1990s scenario, where a lot of the businesses that are very successful in Romania today started in the 90s in that chaos, in that absolute chaos.
And most of them would not be possible today.
Most of them wouldn't be able to start again today. That is also true of the United States to some extent, because there's a lot of...
Another Apple would not be possible.
No, another Apple would not be possible today. Another...
KFC would not be possible today.
KFC,
with all of the food
KFC.
regulations of today.
Are you fucking kidding me? No, the KFC wouldn't be able to start again today. What was it again? Office Depot. Costco, the warehousing business. God, Costco would not be able to have operating margins unless it had scale. Now you need scale. You need to have a big business already to be able to maintain the operation with enough headway to be able to make a profit. You need to scale up a lot. And that's why a lot of businesses go into debt in order to start now. This American obsession with debt also starts from the fact that there's a high cost of entry into business compared to how it used to be, because you have the cost of compliance, you have the cost of taxes, you have to pay capital gains tax, which is, well, that's quite insane, because you're already taxed on income, and then you have to get taxed on your capital gains as well, so you can't even invest in anything, without getting, screwed both ways. And
right, so tariffs. What else?
Tariffs. I'd say tariffs again, but we need to find something else, right? What can I
Our
find?
unstable climate, as in the weather. It's probably the as you've noticed on weather.
Say what, man? I live in Miami. I lived in Miami with
we don't,
freaking hurricanes.
We don't get hurricanes, so I guess that's a winning on
a
us.
couple of tornadoes here don't bother me.
Yeah,
I don't get bothered.
We do
by-
get some tornadoes, although not in this area where we live. But on the other hand, if you look on weather maps, the most unstable weather has to be here, because all of the big currents of the continent kind of meet here.
I'd be bored if there wasn't unstable weather. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, the weather report says it's not going to rain tomorrow, and then it pours cats and dogs. That's really annoying. Also, the fact that sometimes I'm preparing for the fact that, okay, the bills are going to be pretty expensive. The heating bills are going to be pretty expensive because it's going to be a really hard winter. And it's 5 degrees the whole winter. What? Last winter it was minus 17. What's going on? It's always like up and down and up and down. It's a roller coaster of temperatures.
That's probably why most Romanians don't buy the global warming or climate change narrative, because they're like, the climate has been changing in this country every year for the last 800 years. What are you talking about? Yes.
Oh well, CG is. It's a proven thing. I mean, the IPCC has refined its data and actually starts to appear
Yeah, the more refined ones are a little bit closer
are
to
less
reality.
insane. Yeah, these people that are listening to Greta Thunberg and all these people that are saying the apocalypse is near are actually just still listening to the 2007 IPCC data. The more recent data isn't as pessimistic. Although, yeah, there is a problem. but it's a problem we have to adapt to. And adaptation is a sound strategy. But we're getting a little bit off subject. Romania's climate. I could say that it did bother me when I was growing tomatoes, and when I was growing potatoes, and when I was actually farming. It can be a nightmare to farm in this country. Although at the same time the soil is extremely rich. There's a lot of nitrogen here, and because of the really, really fierce thunderstorms that come in the summer, that nitrogen just keeps on coming. You don't have to plant bean stalks after your corn. Sometimes the nitrogen just goes. Other times it doesn't. You're always rolling the dice. Every year. You don't know how your harvest is going to be, and that can be really frustrating, especially for farmers and for the local economy as well, because produce starts to get pretty expensive at those points in time, and that's where I think the climate bothers me. Other than that, I'm not really bothered. I just go with the flow, and I think most Romanians already do. I mean, it's not something that particularly bothered me because I came from Miami, and Miami has similar problems. It has water spouts that come out of nowhere. It has these stupid, tropical storms that just, hello, I'm here.
And some of them are even hard to predict because they form today.
They say, we're thinking this is going to go to Georgia. It's going to be fine, and the next day you're waking up and it's pouring all over you. And your car is flipped over on the lawn.
Yeah, so that's fair. In that comparison, it's nowhere near as bad.
I think it still has an effect. I mean, I get really pissed off when, for example, produce starts getting like really, really expensive because our harvests were so bad, because we had drought or whatever, and it can be really frustrating because there are countries that have worse agricultural sectors than we do, that have more stable weather than we do, and then I'm just thinking, what the hell are you guys doing? Why don't you start cultivating that land? Because we're doing just fine over here. Well, not just fine, but still getting along. That really pisses me off. When, for example, there was that moment when the eggs were like two lei per freaking egg. That's like 50 cents, by the way, for people trying to calculate that. That can be really unnerving.
Although, to be fair, that particular moment when it was, close to 2 lei per piece, it was also an issue of, regulations, because there was the panic of whatever disease that was allegedly affecting the birds. And even though there had been 0 confirmed cases here, there was still an artificially induced shortage by mass executions essentially of birds, and as a result that contributed to the factor, in addition to the previously natural drought, and which had already driven up the prices. So it was a confluence of multiple factors, some of them human generated, and some of them the fault of our unstable climate. All right, number 7.
I have to say this one, but it's a little bit controversial. The absolutely puzzling inability for full-grown men to fix their shit. There was a time when everybody was Nagigel that could fix anything. Sure, maybe not fix it 100% perfectly, and sometimes it would leak a little bit here and there. You'd get a leaky radiator, you'd get your toilet starts spewing a little bit of, really disgusting stuff from the bottom. But they still managed to fix it, make it functional. There's a pride in being a handyman. That pride is just going away in the big cities, maybe not so much in the countryside. And maybe not so much in smaller towns as well. In smaller towns, there's still a lot of people who have the know-how. But I don't think it's the fault of the individuals. I think that, some of them don't want to learn anything. But we have a mutual friend, for example, who was not very learned in the handyman traits, but he wanted to. And he did. He put the effort. He managed to fix his own shower. He managed to fix his own, his own shit, his washing machine, variety of things. And there's some pride in being able to do that, to accomplish that yourself. These little things are very important for men in particular, and also for women. It's not a issue of one particular sex. I think everybody can take a little bit of pride in fixing a little something, maybe even fixing the electricity in the house, the outlets. And this is disappearing very slowly in the big towns, in the big cities.
Why do you think that is the case?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think it's probably fathers and mothers that don't take the effort to actually educate their children on this kind of work, on this kind of bricolage. I keep on saying that, but I keep on trying to say that, but I know we're speaking English. Basically, handyman stuff, right? And slowly, the whole Mr. Fix-It culture is starting to die because it's not being passed on to the next generation. There's also the fact that they just don't consider it so important because they can just pay somebody to come and do it. It's very convenient and very accessible, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that this is a beautiful thing that's happening. That if you don't know how to fix something, you don't have to fix it yourself. You can actually call somebody to do it, but just sit there and maybe watch him, maybe learn a thing or two from him. I did that when I had a plumber come because I didn't know a lot about plumbing, and then I eventually started fixing my own plumbing. It's something that not only saves you a dime or two, but also gives you a sense of self-worth, because you know that you can be a true master of your house. There is something about it. For me personally, for example, culturally speaking, especially since I come from the South, it is very important to be able to master your house and not let the house be mastered by someone else. You master the house yourself. And I think it also comes from rental culture as well. People don't mind, and that's another thing, I will attach it to this, that people are starting not to really mind not owning property. And those who do care about owning property are getting into massive debt to buy some pretentious shit instead of actually just buying a little fix-me-up and fixing it up a little bit here.
Is it really such a problem? Because last time I checked, last year, we had the highest
We do. I'm just saying that this is something that over the next 5 to 10 years, even over the next generation, is going to amplify. That's my concern. There is where I'm concerned. I'm looking at things from a perspective of the long term. I know that things are fine right now, but you can see the little fissures start to develop. You can see these little things start to happen. And it's also this culture of wishy-washy young men who are like, they're like kind of lost in their own little world, having these unaccomplishable goals and getting demoralized by the fact that they can't actually succeed in them. But of course, because they're setting such huge goals for themselves, they have these fantasies, castles in the sky. My mother used to tell me about that. Actually, I really appreciate that from my mother. She told me, you keep on building castles in the sky. Why don't you focus on things that are realistic? And it's true. It's not the same thing as telling somebody, oh, that business is never going to work. No, but it's something about establishing little goals, small accomplishable goals.
Yeah, balancing
day by day,
expectations with reality.
Day by day, just little goals that you're going to do. Be just a little bit better than you were yesterday. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to how you were yesterday. This kind of mentality is kind of lacking in these people. And that's why they're all wishy-washy, very lost, very... I don't know, they're just... You can see that they don't have this wolf pack mentality of goal setter, of go-getter. They might emulate it, like these banker kids, that are all like, hey, dude, bro. And that's not a real, that's not the real thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mentality of somebody who has the persistence and momentum to be able to achieve some ambition. And among those people, there are some. I can't say there aren't. But these younger men have a problem accomplishing this. And as well, that also comes down to the whole handyman thing, because that's also small goals that you can set for yourself. Small things that you can do in your home to maybe today I'm gonna fix the radiator. Maybe today I'm gonna go buy a new battery for my a new a new spigot for my sink and replace it. It's not that hard. You just unscrew 2 tubes and then you screw them back on the next one. It's not that hard. And just little by little, fixing a little thing here, a little thing there. And it also, I guess I'm sounding like Jordan Peterson right now, but whatever, you know, I actually, this is a point where I can agree with him on, that these little things, little by little, also sort out your mind. It helps you mentally. It is psychologically beneficial for young men and young women to do these things, to just have these tiny little goals for themselves. And this lack, the lagging behind that is happening right now is not catastrophic, but it could be. It could be. And Romanian society has never been, how can I say this, very militaristic, extremely strong superpower society. So it is even more important for a society like this to have people that are able to accomplish their goals, to be able to have a certain ambition, a certain bravado, a certain element of courage to go outside their comfort zone in their lives.
One of the reasons that particular handyman culture even developed to begin with was because, well, in the 80s in particular, there was a shortage of anything. So as a result, if things broke down in your household, you kind of had to try your best to recondition what you already had, because there was not an option to buy a new one.
I learned because
so as a result, you had, and also I would say that there was the promotion of the idea of what would be called in English the multilaterally developed person. So, you know, the person who is a jack of all trades essentially, but not necessarily master of none. But it was the first part of the saying was a little bit promoted in schools.
You were at the hard times create strong men types.
Yes,
time
that's true.
At that point.
That's absolutely
That
true.
was-
Definitely true about late 80s in particular, between 82 and 89 or in 1990. But then, of course, things have started getting better. You know, as sadly, only 2 communists got helicoptered. It should have been 5,000, but nevertheless, the commie regime gets helicoptered slowly.
Wait a second. The 2 communists that got helicoptered actually helicoptered themselves.
Yes. Well, I said
They flew with a helicopter from Bucharest to Târgoviște.
I said got helicoptered, passive voice. You know, I'm not attributing agency to communists. In any event, and 30 years have passed since then. This December it will be 30 years since Nicolae Ceausescu became a good communist, and and as a result, over the last 30 years, we've come to the best economic period in history, essentially. There's not a single moment...
We are currently in a golden age here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Even The Guardian acknowledged that. Just a few days ago, The Guardian published an article saying that the Intermarium region is at the peak of its golden age.
Yes.
And they're right, but I was surprised to see the article in The Guardian, but otherwise they're not wrong. The thing is that over these last 30 years, first of all, you could afford to buy new stuff, so you weren't as pressured to fix them as you were in the 80s. And secondly, we have a new generation who grew up entirely with what I controversially like to theme corporate bullshit. And I'm sure you're familiar with that too.
Corporatism,
yeah. In the corporate bullshit world, you're encouraged to specialize on the most minute and niche thing imaginable, just so you can be a very good company man NPC.
As Richard Heinlein once said, specialization is for insects.
It's for insects, yes, I agree. But the thing is that the new generation doesn't. The new generation seeks specialization to much larger degrees than previous ones. Now, Will that be catastrophic? I don't know.
I don't think so.
But it's definitely noticeable.
Because some specialization is good because it develops a kind of division of labor where somebody is really
Sure.
good at this particular thing
Sure.
and can contribute to society his part. And well, we've the whole eye pencil thing from Milton Friedman, where you have a whole bunch of specialists that each are doing their part to develop the pencil. Without it's like what was this guy Adam Smith? He said, as if an invisible hand would be guiding them. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that you have to have a laser focus in that particular branch.
Laser focus, yes, that's the difference. Specialization may not be so bad, but laser focus specialization in individuals is probably going to have some negative consequences on those individuals' lives. Because, eventually that specialized job may dry up.
Yeah.
And then what?
And it would be nice, for example, I used to have a set of tools that whenever I was in a crisis, I would go to my neighbors and start fixing up their stuff for money. There we go. I made some money out of that too.
I do that. I still do have the tools today.
Yeah.
That's how I crawled out of my previous bankruptcy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to be a little bit more multifaceted.
All right, number 7, I think, or 8.
8 this time.
8, yes.
8 this time. Cigarettes.
Yes. While in the US the cigarettes are awesome. I'm smoking Arabic cigarettes right now. The local
prices are not that bad because they're about the same as you would find in the US typically. Well, in regions where the politicians were mentally ill, the cigarettes are like $12, $13 a pack, but most of the US you will find cigarettes at a decent price. The difference in quality, however, is massive. Massive. The quality of Romanian cigarettes is just... I can't bear to smoke them anymore.
And it has gone down steadily since 2007.
Because they have to cut the corners in order to keep the prices the same way they are. Otherwise they would be, like $15, $17 here too.
And it's also the regulations. I mean, there's all of the... Because at first I thought it's the fault of the producers here. But then when I started traveling in the last 10 years in particular, they're all the same. I mean, if you buy the same pack of cigarettes in Sweden, it still tastes the same, even though it's produced in Sweden. If you buy it in Slovenia, it still tastes the same, even though it's produced in like Austria, probably. It's the regulations. The only European cigarettes that still don't taste like the most of Europe is Switzerland, Serbia, and Norway.
The
and Ukraine.
process of washing the nicotine off of the tobacco, which is what you need to do in order to comply with the limits on how much nicotine you can have in cigarettes, takes away some of the flavor as well. That's the problem. And it's also the specific process that they use with CO2 and I don't remember what else. There was another substance that they used, but it is pretty invasive. If for lack of a better term, I'll use that term. It is invasive to the quality of the tobacco, to the quality of the plant. And yeah, I mean it's it's also that the black market in Romania has also been shrinking significantly, and that's
On cigarettes in particular, yes.
Another issue.
Yes, because ever since Ukraine got into a war,
I just got some smoke in my
their quality of cigarettes has gone down as well. Ukraine used to be the main supplier of our black market on cigarettes, but nowadays you can still buy them from Ukraine, sure, but because of the war situation, because of the general poor economic situation in which Ukraine finds itself right now, there are very few brands that have still maintained the quality from before 2014.
It's understandable.
Yeah, most of them have gotten pretty bad. And now the only place where you can get quality cigarettes nearby would be Serbia. But Serbia is a small country, Romania is much bigger, both territorially and population-wise. How do you carry them from Timișoara all the way up to Botoșani and still maintain a lower price on the black market? And it's understandable in a way on why the black market has shrunk. And besides, you live in the center of the country in Sibiu, where it's probably the least friendly place for black market cigarettes because it's too far away from any border. It was the same situation back in communism for those living in Brașov and Sibiu. They could not get much of the contraband that...
Sibiu has just basically, essentially no contraband market at all. Which is sad because I can't get my good quality computer pieces at a reasonable price, but it's better for me to actually pay the tariffs than actually go out of my way to try to find something.
Alright, so cigarettes.
In some way that's successful because you the government actually made it cheaper for me to get the legal product than get the illicit one.
Although geography helped a lot, for sure.
Yeah, geography helps a lot with that. What else? Because we're at number 9 now, right? Beef
sucks in Romania?
No, it doesn't. It's actually really good. The quality of beef here is fantastic. It's the price that drives me nuts.
Yes.
I can't imagine how families here eat meat. Because considering the average salary here, I don't know how much meat they can actually include in their diet. Well, I've probably included a little bit too much, you can see that, right? Yeah, I'm cutting down on that, but at the same time, I mean, I'm usually getting pork or chicken. Because for some reason, there's this specific problem to beef that a kilo has to be sold for this exorbitant, luxurious price that I could only imagine comes from duck or goose.
What's 45 lei a kilo, something like that now?
Beef? I think so. I haven't checked because I haven't even bothered to buy beef anymore.
It's more than $10 a kilo.
It's insane. I mean, I can go to the mini mart in the US and just wait. I just quoted something from The Simpsons or something. No, I can go to a market in the US and just get beef like super cheap. They even...
I didn't notice that it's cheaper in the US.
Yeah,
I didn't notice much difference in quality, but definitely much cheaper.
There's a little bit of a difference in quality. I mean, the beef in the US is not all equal. Not all beef is created equal. There is some beef that is of a little poorer quality. And you can find it, and you can get it real cheap. In Romania, it's only the highest quality beef, which is fine. I really like prime cuts, and I love that good quality beef. But... it's also sold at a premium that is inaccessible. It's just inaccessible. And it's not inaccessible for me. I could eat beef all day, but
I suspect
I would rather not.
I suspect it's due to the low production of...
Well, we're in pork country, aren't we? We're in pork country. I mean,
and there's that. It's not that popular.
Everybody eats pork here. And I have no problem with that. Just that I think that a little bit of beef in your life ain't gonna hurt.
Yeah, as the old saying goes, a vegetarian lifestyle is good, but out of all the vegetables, meat tends to be the best, and especially chicken meat. But if we're being really honest, the best chicken remains the pork. Cea mai bună pasă e porcul. I mean, it just is what it is. So yeah, I mean, the lower popularity of beef could be one aspect. And the lower production. I mean, people milk their cows. They don't
really slaughter them.
They don't really slaughter them. Not to the extent that maybe they should. And definitely not to the extent that it can be noticeable in prices going down a little bit.
It might be a supply and demand issue.
And the reason I'm saying this is because while the price of pork or chicken fluctuates depending on the season, the price of beef only stays at somewhere around $10.50 a kilo. It doesn't really go up or down that much over the last several years, really. If you look at the graph, it's a pretty flat line, very small variation.
Yeah, I don't see it changing very much, but it is expensive and it is a problem because I like having, when I'm grilling or something, I want to cook some beef patties for hamburgers and stuff.
Definitely understandable. I've had US-style hamburgers made at home. They're awesome.
They're quite good.
Yep. Right, number 10.
Number 10. Number 10. Uh-huh. There is still a mentality in this country that is very, very pervasive. That if we have to fix something, we have to do it via the state. I think that's my biggest pet peeve. Because number 10 had to be the biggest, right? That's my biggest pet peeve.
Not necessarily, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to make that the biggest, right? So that's my biggest pet peeve. That Romanians, more so than many other countries, and much more so than Americans, tend to have this mentality that daddy has to fix things.
Or at the very least...
And daddy being the state.
Yeah, or at the very least start from the premises that the government has to somehow be involved.
And there is some cognitive dissonance on this aspect as well, because they hate the state, which is good. Winning. Americans would be on board with that as well. Romanians hate the state, more so than the Americans, actually. Americans hate their state a lot less.
Yeah, and we distrust the state.
And
usually.
there's a natural distrust of the state. But at the same time, if there's a problem, the state has to fix it. They don't want community initiatives. They don't want philanthropy. They don't understand that this is an alternative. It's not that they're gung-ho about the state. It's that I think that people don't have this ingrained and un instinct nascut. You know, this
innate instinct.
Yeah, this innate instinct to believe and trust their own philanthropy as well.
With philanthropy, you're definitely correct. But with community initiative, things have gotten significantly better over the last 10 years.
They have.
I mean, I've written an article about 5 years ago called "And Who's Gonna Build More Roads?" And it was just an anthology of like 50 or 60 examples of communities who built their own bridges, roads, and all sorts of other infrastructure. And most of them ended up being persecuted by the state for their sin of daring to work outside of the state. So that's one issue that's driving the problem, in my opinion. And
I think so, yeah.
And the other one is most people look at, I'm giving the state half of my fucking paycheck. They could at the very least fix the road. So you know, that's another reason why I suspect this kind of mentality still withstands the test of time, even though it shouldn't.
But this pervasive mentality has led to another mentality that it's PSD that's the problem.
And it's not.
It's not the problem. PSD is not the problem.
It's big
PSD is a part of the problem.
Yeah.
It is a part of the problem. But they're looking for this new messiah in the form of another party that is going to come and fix everything.
Yeah, we've seen that movie before.
It's
Just
happening. It's happening. It's starting to happen in the U.S. too, which is concerning me. But we're talking again about Romania. And this whole idea that this new initiative, Ro Plus, or whatever the hell it was called, and
I think the most dangerous cult of our modern times.
Demos as well, and all these other guys, you know, are just new messiahs. We've seen this, and this is where I think drawing a parallel can be quite dangerous, but at the same time illustrates my concern. We've seen this in the Weimar Republic. We've seen this in the Weimar Republic, that the state is ineffective and we need a new state to fix everything. And then some guy with a little short mustache said, I can fix everything, and everybody was following him. Well, not everybody, but enough people that he got into power. And there's also, it's the same mentality now. And things are not bad in Romania. They're not bad. They are,
at least those in the Weimar Republic sort of had a point in the
there was hyperinflation. People were carrying, compared to that situation, this is nothing. That situation, you know, people were carrying their bills on wheelbarrows to go pay for bread because they had to pay with what, like 3 trillion marks?
Yeah, 4 quadrillion marks for $1 or something like that.
There was a problem there during the crash. And there is a crash kind of starting.
Also German sourced.
Also sourced by Germany because, you know, and
We have a German problem here in Europe. I mean, we really do have a German problem.
But I think we're kind of exaggerating when we're thinking, okay, things are so bad and we have to. It's not going to be that bad.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that bad. And
no, it's not going to be another Weimar Republic.
And this whole idea, you know, we're going back to this Weimar mentality that we need another Messiah to save us. Because even Romania during Germany's Weimar Republic era was also looking for its Messiah. There was Corneliu Zedracodran,
yes.
Whatever his name was. There were a lot of other people. I don't remember who.
Not to mention the king went full dictatorial. And
Carol
II.
Carol II.
Yes.
Yeah. Because Carol I, I can't say anything bad about him. Well, I can say a few bad things about him, but not as many as I can say to Carol II. And then there was you know, they were looking for the. So this rodeo has happened before, and now this whole mentality that the state has to fix things. Okay, so let's pick a new state because that's going to fix problems for sure. That's going to fix the problem. You know, it's not the fact that we have too much state on top of us that is creating these problems. No, it's the fact that we have the wrong state.
Right, then I guess it's going to be easier for 10 things that rock about Romania.
I think it is, yeah. I think it's quite easy.
Yeah, but before we move to that, I'm going to put a musical break. But before that, I'm going to have to say that this mentality is probably going to withstand for at least another 20 or 30 years. Because 50 years of communism and another at least 10 of things not being so well for the majority of the population. I mean, things have gone really well for the majority of the population after the year 2000.
I would like to clarify something. When I say that I don't like this mentality, I am not putting this on the shoulders of Romanians. I am saying that it's a mentality that is misguided, but not malicious. It is just misguided.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not malicious, but I'm trying to explain the origins of it. I mean, when you're 50 years under a communist regime and another 10 years of post-communist transition, which did not go well for the majority of the population.
No, not at all.
You get accustomed to the argument that things are just terrible and there's something revolutionary needs to be done because it's terrible.
Oh,
and yes, things have gone really well in the last 20 years, but the mentality needs time to adjust.
To add to this, there is also, in addition to the mentality that the state has to fix things, there's also this mentality that people think that all the bad things in Romania are specific to Romania. That is another big gripe of mine. It's that there's a lot of people that say, this country sucks so much, why can't we have a country like next door or outside of here? You know, vreau o țară ca afară. Dude, I've been to those countries. They're nothing special.
101 countries under my belt. Nothing
30
special.
here. It's not... No, there's nothing special about them. Even the USA has a lot of problems that Romania has. A lot of the things I mentioned, I made parallels to my own country because of the fact that all of these issues are human issues. They are not Romanian issues. They are human issues. Human issues that vary from region to region. That's why a lot of the issues that I mentioned are region specific. Over here, number 10, this one is country specific. It is very, very Romanian. French people don't trash their country as much as Romanians do. Americans don't trash their country as much as Romanians do. Romanians trash their country a lot. On one hand, that means that they have an ambition to be a much better country than they are now. They desire that. But their desires are outflanking the expectations of other countries because you're expecting Romania to be your ideal Romania.
We're holding it to
would
a
be
standard
this
that's
kind
unachievable.
of yeah, exactly. It's a standard that other countries haven't achieved.
And nobody will.
Nobody will because we're humans.
We're not angels.
We're essentially assholes.
Yeah, we're just, or as our friend Terence Pop would put, we're just hairless apes. There's just no way we're going to get these things perfectly. Right, let's listen to a Romanian song and then we'll be back for 10 things that rock about Romania.
Sabia scoasă înainte m-a vrut prin furtună și vulcani. Pășesc înainte într-un val de gând. Sângele aprins și roindu-mi în vină. Pieptul gol pregătit de război. Fraptii mea alergând cu mine. Pământul dă puterea ascunsă din noi. De pe munți puterii coboară. Oarte se adună dilegați din câmpii. Vântul pașii grăbiți din poartă. Joc bătrână jucatenia unui vii. Și graiul curat este boccetul înaintașilor. Pumnalul blândat în inimă mă ridică să lupt. Pentru neam, pentru viață sau moarte, pentru soartă hotărâtă de somn, pentru ce sângeiu pictat de dușmani ce-am răpus. De pe munți puterii coboară. Oarte se adună dilegați din câmpii. Vântul pașii grăbiți din poartă. Joc bătrână jucatenia unui vii. Clipele stinse în nebura timpului. Pencetia pe frunți luminate. Numele prins în bătaia vântului. Scălit de cui înțelepte. Stânga cea veche de strajă vasta. Îmblântată în pământ și văzduh. Graiul moșesc spre cer va urca. Rotind cu mândrie fapte și duh.
Viața mistuitoare
Din de-a vechi se naște un erou.
sub lună și sub soare,
Faptele sale vor prinde ecou.
răspândindu-se în munți și în văi.
Trezit din somnul morții,
Un popor vechi ca munții în sine,
lăsat în munții în voia sorții.
deprinat, glasul cântului suitat, naște-n fișorii în sat, din iad în iad. Frunză vergedă prin pustă, zdreapți teama aici mereu stă, când de cinerețe sună din sat în sat.
Frunză verde deprinat, glasul cântului suitat, naște-n fișorii în sat, din iad în iad. Frunză vergedă prin pustă, zdreapți teama aici mereu stă, când de cinerețe sună din sat în sat.
Right, so we're back. We've listened to Graiul Oștiri from Warchant. Hi, Edwin. So, 10 things that rock about Romania. In the first segment, you complained about the quality of cigarettes, so let me offer you an African cigarette.
Thank you.
Says here, sales only allowed in Namibia, manufactured in Tanzania. There you go. So I've just defrauded the Romanian state a little bit by bringing these into the country. So in order to keep you interested and keep on doing this video, I'm not going to bore you with Romanian cigarettes. So, 10 things that rock about Romania, in your opinion.
Oh, pretty harsh. Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. 10 things that rock. I think there is a propensity for most people to try to be as to present as good an image to you as possible.
Mm-hmm.
People care a lot about their image. In a way, sometimes a little bit too much. But in another way, it's very flattering that there's a lot of people that when they come over to my place, when I go visit them and stuff like that, they try to be as presentable as possible. They try to make you feel as at home as possible.
That's definitely not me, but point taken.
I'm saying, they let you open their fridge and take out something, a beer, things like that. It's a very hospitable culture. One that I'm very familiar with because, many places in the U.S. are also hospitable cultures. Many places in Iran, in Israel, there's a lot of hospitality.
Most of the Middle East,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
It's something that we share in common. That it's a very hospitable culture. Germany, on the other hand, tends to be a little bit more cold and reserved.
And the further you go up north, it's even colder. Not just in climate terms, but although in climate terms as well. I mean, don't go to Vasia in Sweden.
Oh no!
This time of the year, the snow is like 5 feet tall, so
you'll get buried in it and lost. Yeah, it's a very, very. As much as people say that, because I heard a lot of Romanian friends of mine say that no, it's just bullshit. Romanians are not very primitor, like very hospitable and stuff like that. That they're just hospitable to foreigners. No, I've seen Romanians be very hospitable to each other as well. Maybe, there are some regions where I feel like it's kind of weird that, for example, in Târgoviște and Oradea, there were people that were more hospitable to me than they were to their own kin. But that's not the rule, that's the exception. Most Romanians are extremely hospitable people.
All right. And besides, it's very hard to figure it out which is which because, as you know, the word is the same for someone that is outside of the family or for someone who is a foreigner. Străin, yeah. Whereas in English, there's a difference between stranger and foreigner. In Romanian, it isn't. And it's usually the standard of the family for anyone outside of the family, whether that person comes from the United States or Iran or the next town. That's usually how it works. With that said, I guess with the exception of Cyprus and perhaps Jordan, Israel, Iran, I mean, those places are probably slightly more hospitable than we are. But, and Albania too. Albania is pretty hospitable. Probably Albania is the most hospitable because it's the law of the land. The Kanun demands it. It has been demanding it for like 800 years, so they probably have a longer tradition than we do in that. But generally, point taken, we're pretty hospitable. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. Right, number two.
Number two. I think, it's hard to find out. Now, when I was finding things that suck about Romania, it was very hard to find things. Now I don't know where to start. Number two, I think, is... what would number two be? Number two is the tendency to live within their means. I understand, because I live here, that there are lots of people that are getting into this whole debt culture and everything else, but that's still not a major problem. Compared to where I came from, Romanians tend to try as much as possible to live within their means. They are very modest with the way that they do things. They take pleasure in some of the little things in life. In fact, my wife taught me to also take pleasure in some of the little things, and it's quite liberating at the same time. When you find pleasure in a walk in the park, you don't have to go out and buy something or whatever. You just go walk in the park, have a little bit of a sit down, talk to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, with all of the belly aching of some of our social conservatives, the consumerist culture is not a thing for the most part. I mean,
For most people, no.
it's just not.
No.
And we can see it in the statistics too. I mean, the banks are still complaining that the penetration rate of credit cards still hasn't exceeded 5%.
Yeah.
And of those 5% of the people that do have a credit card, half of them never use it. And of the other half, more than 3/4 of them use it once a year for something like a vacation or whatever, and they pay it back really
Whereas
fast.
you look at Americans, actually, there's more credit cards than Americans.
Yes, that's true. And also, I mean, I've run into troubles with that in the United States where a lot of people simply did not believe me that I don't have a credit card, never
Yeah,
had
right.
one, and don't intend to have one. And they're like, oh, you probably forgot it at home. And I'm like, no, it just doesn't exist. The whole idea is outside of my way of being. So yeah, although we do have debt, but when we usually go into debt is usually for things like new furniture, houses. That's pretty much it. I mean, even with weddings, I mean, I've seen that in the US it's now popular to go into debt to attend a wedding, whereas in Romania it's usually you save up money in order to attend a wedding.
And nobody's going to be putting a kilo of bananas on layaway at the counter.
Not anymore, anyway. Not anymore. Although it was, yes, with these kinds of exotic fruits and with TVs. This was a huge mania in the 90s. Because it was very hard to buy TVs and these kinds of exotic fruits during communism, so everyone was buying as many of them as possible. That's why you still find older people's households that have like 4 or 5 TV sets. They don't use any of them, or they use only one of them, but they have 5 of them. Sophia.
Sophia.
Yeah, let's just buy them so they can be there, so I can have the peace of mind that I have 5 TV sets and nobody's taking my TV set ever again. So yeah. But yeah, the fiscal conservatism becomes more natural.
Whatever consumerism or whatever kind of like I must have everything comes from, I think is mostly because of communism.
Yes.
There's a different perspective. There's a different kind of consumerism here. The consumerism of I want more because reasons does not exist here. It's I want more because if something happens, I at least have this.
Or because I couldn't have it as a child.
It's a just in case thing. Or I couldn't have it as a child. A lot of the older individuals in this country also.
And a lot of the younger ones. I have my own items that I buy them in excess because I couldn't have them as a child, yes.
Yeah.
Totalitarianism is a trauma, it really is.
Yeah, it leaves a mark. Number 8.
2.
Internet.
Number 3, internet, yes.
Yeah, number 3, internet.
Yeah, our internet is pretty good.
Yeah. No, it's not pretty good. By my standard, it's fantastic. I was fascinated by the fact that I could download a film in like 3 or 4 minutes when it took me like an hour or back in the US. Well, now it's getting better.
Finally.
Since I've left, it's starting to get
over
better.
the last 6 or 8 months, it has gone really, really well. And I suspect it's because of the repealing of net neutrality. Because it's the only thing that has changed. I mean, when I was in the US last year in May and June.
Yeah, by the way, guys, there's no net neutrality here.
Oh, no, it never has been. When I was in the US in May and June last year in 2018, it was still just as bad as in 2015 when I made that viral video about internet, Romanian internet. So last year in the summer, it was still bad. But as of November or December last year and January this year, the US has climbed up the ranks from 37th, I think, in the world to like 8th. It's in the top 10 now. 8th or 9th. I mean, it's pretty fast climbing up the ranks.
Competition is good, but a lot of this has to do with internet speeds, but Romanian internet is special. It's not only fast, it's also extremely reliable. It goes down once every blue moon. I've had it go down for like 2 minutes once, and I was like in panic mode because I'm used to it being so reliable now. Romanian internet is also has a really good ping, very good peering with other countries. The IXs are very high quality as well. Infrastructure-wise, the internet is the best that I've ever experienced, and I think one of the top in the world. It is very easy to do business over the internet here. It is far more easy because I can move huge databases across multiple networks and not have any issue and get it done really quickly, which also reduces my costs.
Yeah, and it's also, it's the 4th or 5th fastest in the world and the cheapest in the world per...
Cheapest,
no matter how you look at it.
Per megabit, it is the cheapest on Earth. Part of that is due to the extraordinary lack of regulations that are practiced on the internet. Whenever somebody wants to regulate the internet here, everybody goes apeshit. It's one of the things that I appreciate about this country. I would appreciate it if they applied this to other sectors. But, baby steps.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. But once people realize that, wait a second, our internet is among the best in the world because it's unregulated. What if we did this to medicine? What if we did this to
agriculture?
Agriculture?
We could climb up the ranks quite a lot in agriculture. The infrastructure is already there. It's the regulations that keep the commerce at a slower pace than it should be. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. With agriculture, it's going to be a little harder because a lot of people are using very outdated equipment that consumes a lot of fuel. It leads to a lot of running costs. But
but some of that is distorted by subsidies, is distorted by regulations.
Within half a generation, it would get better. It's not going to get better overnight. There's going to be some pain.
Well, our internet didn't get better overnight. We started like the lowest.
Internet used to suck here a long time ago.
I'm one of the old people on the internet. I mean, I've been on the internet since like 1994. And
Jesus.
And in 1994, even having an internet connection in Romania was a gigantic pain in the ass, and it stayed like that way all the way until 2004. In 2004, more than half of the country was still on dial-up. Broadband was barely heard of outside of the big cities. By 2014, there was just no competition in Europe.
You guys went straight from copper to fiber. You didn't even go through the transition of having high-speed broadband with copper.
Oh, yes, there is.
There was DSL, but it was so...
NVDSL as well.
Yeah, I know, but the jump from copper to fiber was just so damn quick.
It was quicker, yes.
It was so damn quick. I just saw it, like, overnight. I remember because I was still here in this country in 2008, I was here. And I saw that there was like copper infrastructure in most of the countryside. It was still, kind of getting there. I lived in the countryside. And I had a copper connection with like 6 megabits, I think it was.
6 or 12.
Yeah, something like that. And then all of a sudden, 100 megabit fiber optic. Just all of a sudden, out of nowhere. It just came and it just steamrolled through the whole country. And I don't think that would have been possible with so many regulations. The US... It's not only net neutrality, it's also the fact that...
Local regulations.
Yes, you have to ask for permission from the other companies that already... You have to occupy a telephone pole, right? And you have limited space on a telephone pole for internet infrastructure because we have it overground, not underground, in most places.
Same as here. Mostly is overground.
Somewhat. For example, in Sibiu, we have an underground line going to our house.
Sure, it's been getting underground now, but for the most part of history it was...
Yeah, because it had to happen quickly. And for an ISP to hook up their line, they had to ask permission from the other ISPs.
That's thoroughly anti-capitalist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's anti-competitive. So that is another issue.
And then there's the issue of bigger providers cutting deals with local authorities, which gives them de facto monopoly protection.
Cartels.
Cartels.
It was a cartelized internet infrastructure. That never existed in Romania. That was just free flow and free range internet at some point. After the whole Rom Telecom monopolies fell, everything was just basically Wild West.
And
was,
to,
and still
to a
is.
certain extent,
It still is the Wild West. I mean, you see telecom providers popping up all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, people think that there are only
little
3
operators.
providers in Romania. There are actually
They're over,
163.
yeah. They're over 100, I know that much.
163 or 143, something like that. There's just quite a lot of them, yes.
Yeah, there's no such thing as cartel over here. There's nothing like that.
Probably there will be sometime in the future, maybe, although I don't think so.
I don't think so, no. There will be something like
More
consolidation.
Yeah.
Market consolidation.
It's
is
probably
always a
going to
natural
reduce to
process.
like 20 providers, not 100.
20 and then maybe 5 major providers dominating most areas, but it's not going to be, well, at least I hope it won't be legally sanctioned local monopolies. It'll just be just local monopolies that came naturally because most people like to converge around one particular carrier.
Right, number 4.
Number 4. So we spoke about the internet, now let's talk about something else. Let's see. Where do I begin? My brain is not working today. The work ethic. There we go.
Really?
Yes. I think that Romanians have a work ethic that is not to be underestimated. I think a lot of Romanians like to put in the work to the things that they want to accomplish. It's not the same kind of persistency that Americans have. Americans are pretty damn busy people. But Romanians also are. Compared to other countries, Spain, for example.
Sure, yes, in that comparison.
Compared to France, maybe not so much compared to Germany, but compared to those countries, Romania has a very strong work ethic and they're very proud of the work that they do. They're very proud of where they work. They're very, and they're not so shy about coming out and saying that they work at this particular job, like a plumber or you know, people still take pride in those kinds of things. Even though there is a culture of snobism, there is somewhat that, you know, the plumber that comes to fix your stuff is probably inferior to you, the graduate in psychology and stuff like that. But not that much. Not that much. I don't see it that much here as I did in the US.
And it has gotten better because people have found out how much plumbers make. And you know, once it's been published that, you know, for instance, a welder, even his underqualified welder, starts from like a teenager can make $1,200 after taxes legally as a welder. You know, many of these university graduates, they're like, I wonder how welding is this time of the year. It would be a good time to start a school in that, because, you know, it's so yeah, no, it has gotten better, yes. But I'm still surprised of you bringing up a work ethic, because you wouldn't notice it. I mean, if you ask most people, they're all like, yeah, we slack off a lot, we're lazy people. That's usually the mentality.
That's because that's the corporatist mentality. But when you're, because corporatists will find a lot of excuses not to work.
That's true.
But we're talking, the majority of Romanians are not corporatists. They're not. They're welders, plumbers, electricians, people who fix, I forgot what they're called, the boilers. They're engineers. They're people who are working in factories. They're people who are working in mining and
mining is still a thing here.
It's a lot of dirty work. A lot of Romanians do dirty work, and they're not really afraid to tell you that. They're not ashamed of it. They're in fact quite proud of it. They take a lot of pride in it. They're very happy about it, and their families are very proud of them as well. There is no shame in Romania in being an electrician. Well, there's no shame anywhere in being an electrician. I'm talking about like being a plumber, being a, you know, I don't know, a general, you know, air conditioning installer or something like that, technician. That's not an issue here, and it's nice to see that, and that stigma is starting to go even further down. I think it's on its way even further down, and people are starting to have conversations about bringing up trade schools again,
They've been legally reinstated last month, I think.
Yeah.
Last month in
Yeah,
September.
and I think a lot of people have agreed when Basescu, previous president of Romania, by the way, I'm sorry, it was like as if though I was telling you like you didn't know. Basescu was saying that we have too many philosophers in this country, and there was a lot of of Romanians that actually were.
Or when he said that the current school, as it was in 2009, brings up too many idiots. That was true. Still is, to a certain extent.
Yeah, there was a massive kerfuffle about that from the media, but the average Romanian was like, yeah.
He probably won re-election with that comment alone.
We have too many philosophers, you know. It's true. Philosophy majors and stuff like that. And there is this mentality that, you know, there isn't so much, there is a lot of value. Yeah, there is a lot of value in people who study history, who study these kinds of things, you know, and do work in archiving and ensuring that this country's history is kept up to date and making sure that we have an accurate account of things that have happened in the past and everything else. But to most Romanians, the average Joe that fixes your toilet is actually quite appreciated. It may sound a little bit weird coming from your perspective, but from my perspective, because I have lived in the United States and I see how undervalued these people are. In my country of birth, I actually find it quite refreshing to see that these people are very valued in comparison in Romania. This kind of thing is quite important.
Fair enough.
I think so.
Number 5.
This is impromptu. I didn't script this, so that's why it's taking me so long to think.
How's that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing at all.
One of the greatest things about YouTube is that you don't have a limited broadcast license. So, you know, if a video ends up being 4 hours, tough. Although, in fairness, the people on this channel are not accustomed to my Romanian language channel, where your average video is 4 hours long.
What number are we on?
4.
4. Nature. The United States has a beautiful vista. The Purple Mountains, the Appalachians, the Grand Canyon. Yeah, we have very majestic bits of nature in our country. However, Romania has all of that condensed into a really tiny space. Because you even have desert, you even have, you know, you have all sorts of biospheres
And it's
in
more
one single country.
and more continuous or contiguous.
And by the way, that's an advantage of having an unstable climate, is that the erosion, the inconsistent patterns of erosion have created very beautiful sites. The Cheile Bicazului, the Transfăgărășan, the you know, that goes through the Carpathian Mountains. Well, of course, built by communists because they didn't know how to transport things correctly, but still, it's very beautiful. Those long, winding roads. There's something absolutely beautiful about the pastoral landscapes that you see when you're passing from one city to the other, and you see these little crickety houses, that these farmhouses, and these fences that are all little lopsided and stuff like that. That's actually quite nice. I like it. It's very quaint. It's very beautiful. It seems like I think I showed my mother one of these vistas, and she said it's like from a fairy tale. It is quite beautiful there. I lived in Hidishelu at one time, and there was a forest behind the house, and that forest was just, it had a lot of old growth. It was absolutely stunning. You would go up to a cliff and you would see all the treetops everywhere. There's a certain degree of freedom to just explore all of these landscapes in a very short amount of time. I could just go hop from where is our desert? I forgot.
It's in the southeast, very close to, a bit to the east of, to the west of Craiova.
Okay, so a bit to the west of Craiova, and then I could go to the seaside and Constanța, and then visit the mountains up in Moldova in one single day.
Yeah. Even with our slow trains, it can still be done in one single day.
In one day.
Yeah. Although to
It's
be fair,
so
the
much-
trains in the south have gotten pretty fast.
It's like nature.rar, you know? Nature.zip. It's just all of it compressed into one tiny country.
Yeah, considering that Romania's surface is what, about the size of Ohio, I think?
Yeah, you can't narrow Romania down to one specific natural landscape. You can't. A lot of people, when they think of Romania, they're thinking of the Carpathian Mountains. Other people,
Or
when
the
they're thinking of
seaside.
Romania, they're thinking of the seaside. Other people, it always depends on where you come from in Romania or where you visited as a foreigner. But, for example, other countries don't have that kind of privilege. The Swiss have the Alps.
And that's it.
There you go. So do the Italians.
Although, to be fair...
The Italians have the beautiful coastlines.
Yeah, they do have the coastlines too. Yeah, I'm thinking about the only country that I know that has a comparable sort of standard. That would be Norway, because their
I'm disappointed you didn't say the UK. UK also has
yeah, but their mountains are not that tall and not that majestic.
Of course.
Whereas the Scandinavian Alps are.
Yeah,
that's
they
why
are
I said,
quite gorgeous.
That's why I said Norway.
And also the
southern
fjords,
and the southern Norway can get pretty warm. That it can be comparable with Romania in terms of biodiversity.
Yeah, and Finland with all the swamps.
Yeah, Finland too.
And then the UK has the cliffs of Dover, the Hadrian's Wall. Well, it was constructed by humans, but still, it is quite a beautiful site. But Romania, I think, has the most diverse natural geography. The most diverse.
And it is probably a consequence of what we were talking about in the first segment, that all of the currents that drive the weather in Europe, almost all of them meet here.
Yeah, and you have places here that it snows almost all year round.
Oh, the Chaclo Top, for instance.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
snows in July. Yeah.
Yeah, it snows in freaking July. And then you have, places where it's just 40 degrees in the same country.
Yep. Yeah. I wrote an article about 10 years ago or 11 years ago. I think it was in 2008. Over a span of 2 days and a half, I've seen all of the seasons in a November. So I left from the far east next to Galați, where it was warmish, like 19 degrees Celsius. Went all the way down to Bucharest, where there were 32. And then went to my uncle next to Brașov, where the snow was all the way up here and minus 10 degrees Celsius. And then went all the way up to Cluj, where it was raining. It was proper autumn. So within 2 days and a half, I've seen all of the seasons. That kind of thing, it's very hard to achieve in smaller countries. Yes, in the US you can see all of them in one day, but you need an airplane for that, presumably. Because I haven't, well, actually I did see 2 seasons while I was in the US. Yeah, because the climate in DC was very different from the one in Chicago.
Yeah. They don't call it the Windy City for nothing.
Yeah, I've heard the story about the Windy City. It has never been that windy. It was just a nickname that literally a clown, gave to the city, and a newspaper editor thought it was funny, so therefore continued to use it. Once again, media manufactured narrative. Anyway.
Manufactured by clowns.
Manufactured by clowns, honk, honk.
Honk, honk.
Where the hell is my nose? Yeah, I bought honk noses, but they're over there. Screw it, yeah. Right, number 5.
Number 5. The illegalist culture.
Illegalist. Explain
Illegalist.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
explain that.
The people who just don't give a single crap about what the state has to say, they will do things their way. I like that. I like that because it leads to more affordable outcomes sometimes. You can find even food pretty cheaply. Honey, you can find it. There's almost a bootleg for everything. Hell, even soda can be bootlegged. Soda, pop, whatever the hell you guys want to call it. This kind of culture, I'm very, very sad that it's starting to really dwindle. But it is a good culture, this whole, big middle finger to the state. No, let's give people affordable stuff. I enjoy that, and to a great measure that actually did help the poor quite a bit in Romania. when people, because when I first moved here, there were a lot of people earning like 600 lei a month. They had very meager salaries.
Probably even less than that. The minimum wage when you arrived was 300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
like $70.
saw the prices, and I said,
Although to be fair, very few people were actually making the minimum wage because it was way below market.
yeah, but I was stunned to see that these people were living quite okay. They were, they weren't really living very comfortably, but they were able to get by. And I said, how the hell did they manage to do that? Because
and debt free too.
Yeah, debt free. How did they manage to do that? Because I need at least at a minimum, back then, I said at least a minimum of 1,000 lei to live decently. At least to that level. And then I figured out that there's alternative markets where they get their stuff. And they find it. And, it's basically circumventing regulation. And a lot of people were able to live despite the government. People think that because of the government we have civilization. No, we have it in spite of it. In many cases. In other cases, yeah, there are I would agree that some things we do have civilized society because of the government in some cases, but most cases I would say it's not. Anyway, that's off on a tangent. Yes, the illegalist culture, this culture of people who just basically bypass the law and just do whatever the hell they want to just get their product to the market. I think sometimes has led to safety issues. There have been concerns about that, but that's extraordinarily rare. For the most part, you found good quality product and at a very cheap price.
Yeah, the accidents related to unsafe, unregulated products are still, and to this day, they're very rare. They do happen, but...
Some would say that it's even more likely to find it unregulated products. There have been a lot of regulated products that have caused problems. That's what I'm saying. It's not, the regulation is not going to protect you. At best, the regulation is just going to establish a standard. That's it.
But there's no guarantee everyone will follow it because you can't enforce it on 100% of the vendors anyway. So, so there's that. Yeah. Although I would say that this is not necessarily dwindling. I mean, I was about to complain about the Cluj-Napoca is not a good example. Cluj-Napoca is the one place where you can't really find alternative markets unless you're willing to, travel a little bit. Yeah. But for instance, in Bucharest and in Iași and in Oradea and in Timișoara, alternative markets are still the norm. So even the big cities still do maintain some of these.
And there's even mass suppliers. We're talking about en gros. I went to a place that made pies. And usually every morning I would go get a pie from there because I like their pies. And the guy trusted me a lot. We actually spoke quite a bit about things, and eventually we got to the conversation of regulation and things that he had to go through. And he told me that he actually purchased his flour from a local producer that didn't account for it. It was just, he accounted it as trash. It's just trash, but it's going to him, and he's getting it really cheaply by the barrel.
He didn't have a license for the flour. That's terrible.
And his oil came also from another manufacturer that was just putting it aside for him.
Speaking of oil, cooking oil, I have a friend who, when he was a student, because he couldn't afford gasoline, because 60% of the price of gas is taxes, so he couldn't afford that. But on the other hand, he couldn't afford to live in the inner city of Bucharest. He had to live in a village nearby, therefore he needed a car. And he was fueling it with fast food, used up fast food cooking oil.
So he refined it and was able to... Yeah, well, you could technically turn it into diesel.
Now he was turning it into gasoline for his 1310 Dacia.
You need a...
Yeah. And this was like in 2012, not in 1991 or something.
Yeah.
It's still doable. Right. Number 5, I think? 5, yes.
Number
or 6.
No, I think it was number 6 now.
Yeah, it should be 6 now. Yeah.
It should be 6. Right?
Yeah, well, if we worked up then the number, someone in the comments will say, hey.
Number 6. The care that people have for things.
Care?
Yes.
All right. How is that?
People don't just throw away things. The throwaway culture, we've talked about that with the negative things. The throwaway culture isn't such a big thing here. It's not. If I have an old car, in America, usually by the time it's 10 years old, they're like, just throw it away. Why? Because it's expensive as hell to maintain it. In Romania,
Rednecks don't do that.
No, rednecks don't do that. In Romania, people actually care about their cars. They use them until they're completely dead. They'll use their computers until they're completely dead. They will not replace things until it becomes too inconvenient to use, to the point that you're just wasting your time. A good example of that is some dude that I met that he had a computer from the 1990s and used it to run a server for his business.
I ran a server with a computer like that, made in '94, ran
he just runs a
2018.
Linux server, you know, just he's still using it even today.
Well, mine went up into flames. I had to throw it away.
It got a little bit exploding.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And at one point, he decided that his CPU is no longer keeping up with his demands. So he went and bought another CPU. I think it was a Pentium 3. I don't remember. A used one.
Of course.
From one of these little market sites, and just dirty lane, put it in, and now he has a new CPU and was able to maintain the server. If he cannot justify the cost of maintaining that server, then he will buy a new one. But until then, it's perfectly fine. And Romanians have a tendency to use this mentality that I will keep this thing until it is no longer of use to me.
In a way, we're very environmentally friendly with this.
Yeah, it's actually quite eco-friendly.
But we don't get any rewards for that. I mean, that's why I'm laughing when I see the eco-Marxists say, oh, the state should incentivize these things. And I'm like, we're doing it without incentive. So, maybe...
I'm not sure that the Euro regulations make any sense. Why? Because
most of them don't.
Sure, you will pollute a little bit more with an old car, but you will pollute even more manufacturing a brand new car that pollutes less.
Yeah, even with cars, it's an iffy example, but I'm thinking everything else of fridges. I mean, yeah, sure, it may not sound so cushy to use. I've just recently visited someone, and I was surprised to see a Minsk fridge made in 73, still functioning impeccably today, only being fixed once or twice in the last 40 years. Was just one of those that were built to be resilient over time and definitely
maybe even useful as a nuclear bunker.
Yes, and I was like, well, but doesn't that consume too much? And he's like, yes, but electricity is cheap in Romania. And he's like, I pay maybe 5 lei a year extra because I have an older fridge. That's cheaper than buying a new fridge. I mean,
fridges don't consume a lot. It's just the compressor that has to run. That's it.
Yeah, but those made in the 70s, the Minsk series, were a bit energy hogs. But as it turns out, when you put the math on the paper, it's not that much, not much worse than the modern ones, and you might end up being cheaper. Using those if they can still function. But it's true in every other aspect. Yeah, almost all of the appliances that people use, they tend to be able to keep them up a bit, keep them around for much longer than our friends in the western part of the continent.
Yeah. You don't see these massive junkyards, for example, with old things that still work.
Yeah, the junkyards exist, but nothing from there
is of any use.
At best, you can harvest...
Recover the copper.
Yeah, the copper, or maybe recover some spare parts, maybe. But none of those things that are in the junkyard can be plugged in and just work.
And even in OLX, the basically Romanian eBay...
it's not Romanian, I think. I don't know who owns the company.
I don't know, but it's a very popular application in Romania. There's people selling their cars for pieces.
Yep.
Like, literally selling your car for parts.
Yeah, like $50 or $100.
That also happens in the US, but only in select areas. It's not a typical thing in the US. No, people are just, I've got to buy a new car, I've got to have a new car.
Right. So the care for stuff. Okay, fair enough. Number 7.
Number 7. Uh, what should I put at number 7? We've talked about a lot of stuff, and I'm trying not to repeat myself. I think I would say maybe people's resilience. And what I mean by that is that they have this kind of mentality that if there is a crisis, they will stick together. They want there is a this concern that people have that people are getting disconnected from each other and stuff like that. But
Atomization is less of a thing.
yeah, atomization is not that bad over here. Actually, for example,
The cynical in me would say not yet.
no, it's not that bad. People will come together if something really bad happens. Even when the government started doing some really crazy stuff like legalizing corruption and stuff, well, it wasn't such a huge issue in my mind, but it was something that a lot of people just gathered up for. And they didn't gather up as, we're going to be a big horde and protest. No, it was a lot of people that actually cared about one another. It was a lot of people that actually, that there is some semblance of, even people that say, screw Romania, I hate this country, will at some point, if something happens to it, they will be concerned about it. They will have the willpower to want to do something about it. And I'm talking also about local crises. Like, for example, look, my brother-in-law lives in a village where a lot of the elderly folk that are living there were very helpful. They were trying to help them start out. I also lived in a village where a lot of people were also very helpful, very friendly, and I'm not talking about just friendly, like just saying hello, hey, no, I'm talking about like we're going to
Community involved.
work something out so that we can help you out with this thing and see if, but at some point, of course, you owe them a favor as well. There's the whole I scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of thing. And it comes from communism as well. It's probably one of the few things that are positive about communism is that it actually got people to try to find ways to deal with situations together in a proactive
You
manner.
had to in order to avoid all sorts of commie regulations. I mean, back in communism, the party would send inspectors in everyone's backyard to see whether they're growing an extra pork, not declaring it to the party and not surrendering to the collective. So, if the community was united, they would hide all of the porks or the pigs somewhere remotely, not to be seen by the party, and then they would all stick to the same story, and the party would then report, well, nothing extra was being grown in this village, and even though they grew enough to...
It is something I see in communities back in the States as well. And that's why it just came to my mind, because it's some similarities that we have. It's one particular similarity where I think it very strongly resembles what goes on in the United States as well. There's this whole sense of community, and not everywhere. It's a region-specific thing, because in Romania there are places where people will be like, fuck you, every man for himself and stuff like that, also brought about by communism. There was, again, these two aspects, that there were two ways of dealing with communism. There was the way of just trying to stick together and brave it out together, or you just, every man for himself, fuck that guy, I'm just gonna do my own thing and leave him behind for my own benefit. And both of these things, as extreme opposites as they are, were both created by the same circumstances. But I think I very much appreciate it when you've also helped me out of binds before as well. I'm saying that, and we are not family. I mean, well, not blood relatives, but you understand what I'm saying. There's people here that are not my blood relatives that have been, have received me with open arms and have made a home for me in this country. And I think there is something to be said about that. There's something to be said about that that is specifically a very Romanian thing. It's a very generally Eastern European thing as well. But it's something that you don't observe quite as much in some of our Western countries.
Definitely not too observable in Germany, I could say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Germany is still fresh in my mind because I've just been there,
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. I think that there's something to be said about how warm people are about that over here. That how willing people are to help you get on your feet. But of course,
it has to be a reciprocal thing.
Yeah, it has to be reciprocal.
Yeah.
There's the concept of obraz. You know? You're not gonna you're not just gonna get a free ride. You have to be a contributing member to society. You
Help
have to
yourself in order to be helped, I guess would be
Exactly.
one way to sum it up.
Exactly. Yeah, move your ass as well. You know, you have to move your ass too.
Right. Okay. Number 8.
Number 8. Number 8, I have to say, and in a sorry, not sorry kind of way, because I know some people will get triggered by what I'm about to say.
Do trigger away.
Oh, yeah.
Triggering intensifies.
I think number 8 is a region. Transylvania. I think it's by far my favorite part of the country. I mean, no one can say that Moldova is not a beautiful part of the country. No one can say that the South is not a beautiful part of the country. There's a lot of beautiful things to be seen about it. But to live in a specific part of the country, I've never lived better in my life in any part of Romania than Transylvania. I believe it is fitting for all sorts of people from all walks of life. And that's why a lot of people come here from other regions of the country. I mean, you're from Moldova.
Yeah, but my mother's side is from here. From
Your
Cluj.
mother's side is from here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but, you know, you came
I
from...
grew up split, basically.
Okay. But there are a lot of Moldovans that came over here. There are a lot of people from even Bucharest that came over here that have,
my neighbors across the street are lawyers from Bucharest. They commute by plane to Bucharest.
Not only that, but the people who live here also integrate into this. Transylvania is one of those few places that you can't help but integrate into it. It pulls you in. It makes you a part of them, and it's very happy to do so. And there is a very strong diversity here, more so than in many other regions of Romania. There's a very strong amount of diversity, and it gets along just fine because it's the right kind of diversity.
Right. I would push back a little bit on that. I used to hold that opinion, especially 10 years ago. I'm less convinced by it now because up until about, let's say, till 2012, the amount of both external and internal migration, so internal I'm thinking from the former kingdom towards here, and external from other countries, was still low enough that the body politic of Transylvania was able to integrate. Nowadays, this is specifically true in Cluj, the amount of internal migration is higher than optimal.
It may be a bit exaggerated, yes.
And as a result, this city is turning into a Bucharest with slightly nicer buildings. And the reason I don't live in Bucharest is precisely because I don't like Bucharest, and I might end up moving away from this city as well if it turns into...
Well, you're always welcome in my city.
Yeah, I was thinking either Hermannstadt or Oradea.
Hermannstadt is very good, yeah.
But probably Oradea, because Hermannstadt is too much of a village for now. So.
You gotta come back here. It's actually quite good now. Oradea is also really good. I would say Hermannstadt is a little bit less chaotic. Though.
Yeah, but I like chaos.
Well, yeah, chaos is a ladder after all. Huh?
There you go. There you go.
But in the end, I'm referring specifically though to the entire region. Cluj is not Transylvania.
No, but it's the heart of it.
I can agree with you on the fact that some of the things that have been happening, especially recently, have transformed Cluj a bit. I think it might be able to resist the changes. It might.
What's interesting is that the highest amount of leftists, I mean really extreme leftists, live here, not in Bucharest. Yet at the same time is the most conservative big city in the country.
Yes.
Which is, so that's probably the optimistic way of looking at things. Given that it's a very conservative area, it may still withstand the influx of...
But that's because the leftists here are very vocal, but that doesn't mean that they're in power.
No, they're not, and
They
it's
can,
unlikely.
it's very unlikely that they'll
Yeah.
gain power.
Yeah, in Bucharest they don't have to be that vocal because they're already in power.
Yeah, the,
S-au pierdut cu firea. Good luck explaining that in English.
no, I can't. Yeah.
The name of the mayor of Bucharest is Gabriela Vânceanu Firea, and Firea also means losing your temper. So if you say you lose your temper, you say s-a pierdut cu firea, and basically that's a pun based on the fact that they voted for that individual, which is was really shocking.
So I'd have to say that there still is a strong element of what I was talking about. That Transylvania continues to be a place that I believe is the most fitting for myself, at least, and I consider it to be not just a very beautiful area, an area that is not only well administered. There's a lot of things I can say that are positive about Transylvania. I can say some things that are negative, but right now we are focusing on the positive. And I think that as far as the people, the state even, the mentality, and all of these things combine to create a very, very pleasant area to live in. I have, as I said, and I will repeat it again, I've never, ever felt so at home in any part of Romania like Transylvania.
Fair enough. Right, number 8, I think.
I think it's number 8. Number 8 would have to be Romania's immigration system. And I've
So that's a positive, the long queues at IGI?
Yes. Well, it's not IGA anymore. What is it called now? I forgot.
IGM, I think, the General Inspectorate for Migration. I think that's the new name.
I don't care.
Our version of Migrationsverket.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of my friends were saying, oh my God, the Romanian immigration system really treats you harshly. Oh, that's so horrible.
Do you remember when you were about to get deported?
Yeah. And I retort to that and I say, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that they are harsh and strict. It's a good thing. Even with Americans don't get a free pass. It's not, it's not like, all of a sudden you have this VIP status because you have the right passport. No, over here you are a pleb until you're proven otherwise. You have to prove to this country that you deserve to live in it for them to want to take you in.
Yeah, we have our own mutual friend from Canada who couldn't. So there's that. I mean, I'm sorry I had to say it. But no, there is, it's basically 5 tiers. And the American passport is not first tier. I think it's second or third. And 5th is usually countries that we really don't like. I'm thinking of Indonesia, but North Korea, most of the Islamic countries. So you had it better if.
I did have it better than others.
Yes, but nevertheless, yeah, it is a lot less tolerant. Let's put it this way.
And for my residency application, even though in many countries to get residency, you don't have to know the language of the country. I had to write an essay in Romanian of at least 500 words of why I want to live in Romania, what I want to do here with my life, and that's about it. I had to write an essay about that, and I wrote it, and the inspector had to like it. If the inspector didn't like my essay, marshfa.
Yeah, you can get rejected if the inspector doesn't like your essay.
Or your eyebrows, or your nose, or your,
What they usually look for in that essay is basically, look, do you write at least as good as a 6th grader or not? That's usually what they're looking for. So, if your writing is lower than a 6th grader, then then you're right.
And they check to make sure no one was next to you advising you on it. You know, they don't want to, they want you to be the one who wrote it.
Yeah, because they don't regard it as a simple bureaucratic procedure. It's
No.
they take it very seriously.
Yeah, they take it.
There are other things that they don't take seriously, like whether you paid your social insurance or not. They don't really give a shit about that. That's basic. That's usually the shit test of you being able to going through the bureaucracy. If you can withstand that bureaucracy, then that means you're.
If you're able to partake in Romanian bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's the same is true in Germany actually. In Germany, the same thing. They put you through a lot of bureaucratic hoops that don't matter. They don't care whether you've fulfilled them entirely or not, but just so you can partake in the German bureaucracy, which oftentimes tend to be comparable with the Romanian one, and tend to be pretty absurd. Yes.
I don't think that the immigration system is harsh. I don't think it's harsh enough. Actually, I think that it should be harsher. Allowing me to become a citizen of this country after only 8 years, I think is a little too little. It's not enough. I have been living here for 11 years, and I still feel like there are some boundaries I have to go through in order to fully acknowledge that I am a Romanian. A lot of people already consider me a Romanian. Dracului vorbesc română foarte bine, deja honestly. But I am not convinced that, I am convinced I can be an asset. And I'm not saying this out of arrogance, I'm just saying this, I can be a bit of an asset to the country, at least about as much as any other citizen. But I think the barrier to citizenship should be a bit higher. That's all. I think that the immigration system is fantastic. I think that the experience that I had in immigration is very good. I think it's about as complicated as the U.S. Maybe not as much, because U.S. citizenship is kind of...
It's slightly easier to get.
Not so much. No, it can be quite exaggerated, especially when you're going in through work or something like that. If you're going in as family, it's quite easy. But when you're going in as somebody who's working in the United States and on a working visa and stuff like that, and trying to get from that to citizenship is going to be really tough. Unless you're a VIP, like a soccer player or something like that. In Romania, it's kind of similar, because if you're getting in through work, or from work to citizenship is actually also tough. It's really, really tough. Unless you're a footballer, again. There's some African footballers that actually decided to have citizenship over here.
I talked with one of those who used to play for FC Vaslui, and he still lives in Vaslui now. The team doesn't exist, the club doesn't exist anymore, he still lives there. But no, it turned out it was quite difficult for him too, even though he was like the second best scorer in multiple seasons. And
it also depends on income. That's the thing.
His income wasn't bad at all.
And you have to be mentioned in foreign press constantly and stuff like that. You have to have a really strong VIP status to have a much easier way. For examure, the finance minister of Poland would have an easier time.
Oh
getting Romanian citizenship than this guy.
Sure.
But
well, in the case of Mike, I mean, his original citizenship, I think, was from Zimbabwe,
or David Cameron, for example, or what was this guy's name again? Cristiano Ronaldo would also very easy.
Yeah, but then again, with the EU citizens, it's a little bit simplified to begin with.
That's true.
So Ronaldo has a Portuguese passport.
Pele.
Well, Pele would be a good example.
Pele. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, the immigration system is not quite as harsh as I think it should be, but it is harsh enough that it satisfies me, because there is some satisfaction to be had when you have gone through a difficult path of baptism by fire in order to get your citizenship. Because it means something. If it's handed out like candy,
then it's no longer valuable. It's
not really valuable. You don't care. And of course, I mean, Romanian citizenship in the grand scheme of things is not going to be super, super valuable. I mean, nobody's going to be impressed that you're a Romanian citizen, but who cares? You are impressed.
Although lately it has become pretty impressive, since
now it's
12th or 13th most strong passport. I mean, it's not that bad.
Those, it's actually a pretty good passport to have.
Yeah.
You gain access to a lot of areas that sometimes Americans can't get into.
Yeah,
For example-
I can go to Iran visa free. You can't.
or Transnistria.
Oh yeah, definitely Transnistria.
If I want to go to Transnistria, I have to wait till I get my Romanian passport.
Yeah, you just don't with an American.
No, with an American passport I can.
Yeah.
And I have to speak Romanian with a nice accent because if I speak English, who's this guy?
Now, Ruski, however, I mean, you know.
Yeah, if I speak Russian, it will be fine. I can also speak Russian.
Right, number 9.
Number 9. Still having trouble finding out where do I begin. There's so much stuff. I can just keep on talking like a dog on crack, you know? I have to make some, I have to narrow it down so that it can be important stuff. Generally, people have a sort of, even if they don't know it, and even if they don't want to acknowledge it, they do have a sort of conservative mindset. And not the conservatard, ultra-orthodoxo, illegalized sex before marriage kind of thing. No, I'm talking about like generally like resisting...
Non-revolutionary?
Exactly, resisting these immense changes to things. Maybe having their own ideas of what changes should be made to the country and stuff like that, but it all gobbles up, it cancels it out with all the other ideas that everybody else has because they just don't, they don't match up quite well. But where people agree tends to be, where people actually are in agreement in general in Romania tends to be a very live and let live kind of mindset. They don't. Most people don't like it when, for example, tax evaders are considered thieves. That comparison is very difficult to find. Although if you do move to Oradea, you will find that there are a lot of people who do that over there. I can't understand their logic. But
too much influence from Hungarian big state mentality?
Maybe. But in general, in Romania, there tends to be this mentality that they just... first of all, the distrust for government, and then also this conservative mentality, this mentality of let's not rock the boat too much, let's not do that kind of thing, and even in their personal lives also, like basically, why the hell am I gonna pay, I don't know, what kind of sum for a kilo of this when I can have a nice little mushroom stew or something like that. They're thinking in terms of I don't have to be engaging in this excessive luxury and stuff like that. There's no kind of culture like that. It's not mainstream in Romania, at least. The mainstream culture in Romania tends to be one that is far more reserved, far more.
Reserved is a good term. Yeah.
Far more.
Even glossy magazines are pretty reserved.
Yeah.
And even when compared to our neighbors, I mean, I've taken a look at the glossy magazines and the mainstream shit in Hungary or in Poland. They're less reserved than ours for some reason. Even though technically speaking, we're the most liberal in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. The only thing missing in this whole hodgepodge of ingredients is education about classical liberalism, and not a lot of people will. In Romania have been exposed to it so much. But if they would be exposed to it enough, I think they'll gobble it up. They'll gobble it right up.
Yeah, I've noticed this when I went to do political agitprop in villages, and to most of the people I would have to only explain to them why they are conservative already. I didn't have to sell them new ideas.
No, yeah.
Because they had them already.
And again, we are talking about fiscal conservatism here.
But also social conservatism.
Even social conservatism, but there's a diverging opinion on this. I mean, most people in the cities are not as social conservative
as they should be.
As people in the villages. But fiscal conservatism, even people in the city tend to have that as well. I think that most people, if they understood that they can do things by themselves without needing this big state to do everything for them, if they understood that there is case scenarios where this thing actually is successful. For example, Singapore's healthcare system, where yeah, the state is involved in the hospitals, but a lot of the action that happens is private. They just manage to have this nice little harmony between state and private that actually works correctly because people take ownership of their own medical accounts, which is good.
Which removes the incentives for
It
insurance
removes the
companies.
incentives for insurance companies. It removes incentives for single payer. It removes all these incentives that actually inflate the prices of medicine way beyond what they should be. And then creates this vicious circle where people start to think that, well, if the state wasn't paying for this, then I wouldn't have been able to afford it. Yeah, but what do you think created that price in the first place? It's because you are being cut out of the negotiation. That's why. But anyway, back to the subject. I mean, people, it's not going to take very long. It's not going to be very hard to get people to on board a classically liberal mindset here, because they already have that conservative mentality that again comes from fucking communist times.
Yeah, once you've seen how the lack of it can end up, you started to think that maybe that direction is just really wrong. We'll see how things will evolve, given that the next generation has not been exposed to that. I mean, I'm thinking people born in 2000, let's say, or 95.
A higher proportion of Romanians, though, can agree that communism is bad than proportion of Americans.
That's true. Yes.
And that's where we're starting from. There is a starting point. There's an ember. We just have to turn it into a bonfire.
True.
And it's not very hard to turn an ember into a bonfire. Now, in America, there are some places where it's a wet wood. It's not ember. It's wet wood that you're trying to light on fire. It won't work. Portland, for example.
The People's Republic of Portland.
Yeah.
All right. Number 9, I think.
Did we do number 9 or?
I don't know.
You're not even keeping track. All right.
Well, if I fucked it up, that's okay.
That's fine. It can be 12 or 13, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, the more the merrier. Number 9. So we've already spoken about a lot of stuff. Now let's speak about... What should we speak about?
Well, the food is definitely good enough.
Oh! Now that you brought that up. Sarmale. And yeah, the food, man. The diversity of food as well. It's just different areas cooking their food differently. There's regionalities among the food. You know when a sarma was made in Moldova by how it tastes. You know when it was made in Ardeal by how it tastes, in the south by how it tastes. They each have their own ways of doing things, and nobody has this recipe book that they're taking out to. No, it's just passed on from generation to generation, and all of these dishes, varza la Cluj and stuff like that, they're very simple. They're not very complex meals. They're not extremely over the top. Most of the food uses like 4 or 5 ingredients. It's not excessively complex. I like to make it complex because I'm just, I like to flirt with danger in the kitchen. But you could ask my wife how much I like to spice food. It's just insane. But Romanian food at its essence is simple dishes that are very filling and extremely palatable to almost the palate of almost anybody. I mean, anybody can taste the Romanian dish and say, tastes really good. As opposed to some other countries where you're eating escargot, for example, and you're like, oh, what is this shit?
Yeah.
I never got that from Romania.
There are very few Romanian dishes that are an acquired taste that you have to get accustomed to. I'm thinking, for instance, in the southeast, of course, there are a lot of dishes that are with fish because there's the Danube and then there's the Black Sea, but there is no Constanța equivalent of Surströmming, which is an acquired taste.
Or haggis.
Yes. So there are.
There is a bit of an equivalent to haggis. What? Drob.
Yeah, drob would be an acquired
Drob is a little
taste.
bit tough for me to eat, actually.
Yeah.
I don't like it very much, but again, that's an exception, not the rule. Romanian food is very, very rich. It's very tasty, and by far because of the influences that come from it. You know, Hungarian influence from Bab Goyash, and then also the sarma from Turkey,
from the Ottoman Empire.
From the Ottoman Empire. And there's just this mix, this hodgepodge of different regionalities that come from different
And
countries.
then
they all come
three different flavors of Slavic influence, because there's the Polish, Ukrainian stuff, then there is the Soviet era stuff, and then of course the Serbian influence. Bulgarian influence not so much, because they've been thoroughly influenced by the Ottoman Empire, just like we did. Yeah. The diversity of food is for sure an aspect.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's quite fantastic.
And the only places comparable that I visited are also areas that have been under the Ottoman Empire. So a similar diversity, you can find it in Albania.
Yeah, say what you want about the Turks, but they really have good food.
Yeah, and they really love their food. And
Oh, yeah.
And to this day, I mean, the food in Turkey is something that you cannot complain about when you end up.
And there's a certain amount of care taken to the preparation of every meal in Romania. Almost nobody. I mean, my wife was very resistant to the idea of getting a microwave. I told her that it would be nice to heat up soup in the microwave because it heats up more uniformly. It took me a while to convince her, but we want to get a microwave soon. But the whole concept is that you want to make the food nice and fresh and as delicious as possible. There's a great care taken by people in preparing their food. And preparing the food for their guests and preparing food for themselves even. There's some pride in how you manage to cook and how and Romanians are very enthusiastic when they're serving a foreigner, you know, one of their traditional dishes, and they make sure that they cook it absolutely perfectly, and they want to know your impression. They're very desperate to know how much you like the food, and dude, let me eat.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Right, and the final one, number 10.
Number 10, drinking. The wine.
Yes. I'm not surprised. Yes.
The wine.
I mean, 2,200 years of tradition then.
Yeah, the wine. The wine here. The wine. You will find. I mean, you get a nice white Zinfandel in the USA. How much is that going to cost you? It's going to cost you like $45. $45, $50. The same thing here. Well, we don't have the same thing here, but a Fetesca Alba, Fetesca Negra.
That's like 9 lei a bottle?
Yeah, it's like 9 lei a bottle. It's like, what, $2? $2 and $2.50. It's really cheap, high quality, very well made. This is one of the few areas in which Romania doesn't regulate. Again, wine production is not tariffed.
Well, the last one who tried ended up being killed. I mean,
Yeah.
that was about 2,100 years ago. And the lesson was learned. Just don't regulate our wine. Just don't.
And even meads, to a certain extent, also fall under that. They are not
from the same tradition.
Yeah, it's from the same tradition. Although it is a little bit more rare, and I'm trying to make it more common because I think mead is very delicious. I actually learned how to make mead from recipes that come from the old Dacians over here. And, well, anyway, back to wine. And also the hard liquor that is made here is pretty good. I would say better than moonshine. Personally, I find that palinka tastes a lot better than moonshine because it's more rich in flavor. It's made by fruits.
Yeah, it's more.
It's not made by. It's not made. The precursor is not corn. Moonshine was made by bootleggers. There's a certain culture of bootlegging behind moonshine, whereas
palinka is still made by bootleggers most of the time.
It's made by bootleggers, but it's a little bit more rich because palinka was a way of distilling to be able to conserve the fruits as a drink. So you have a nice. You know how to tell if a palinka is really good, right? You pour it on plastic and see if it melts.
Then there's also regional variance on that. I mean, with the exception of the Southwest, where their version is just terrible. All the others have different tastes, but they're still good. I mean, in Moldova, usually the way you test it is you just pour it and you burn it. And if it doesn't burn, then it's
just
shit. Yeah, it's shit. And
it's just garbage.
Yeah.
Apa chioară.
Aqua chioris aghiazma popi.
Yeah. So, in the southern region, they make their own hard liquor, but the hard liquor for them is basically water for me. It's just grape juice and I don't like Tuika. I don't like it. It's too weak. But when it comes to what is made traditionally over here and in Moldova, rakiu and palinka, and those tougher drinks, it's nice and steady. It's not supposed to be smooth. It's not smooth because you're not supposed to drink it quickly. You drink it at a leisurely pace and enjoy the aftertaste. And it leaves behind a beautiful aftertaste.
And if it's well made, it does not leave a hangover the next day.
Yeah. Because you pour out the contents from the still, maybe the first half a liter, just pour it out, give it to the pigs, whatever. Just don't drink that shit, and then it gets rid of all the volatile alcohols. You just have to make sure that it gets from 85 to 95 very quickly. That's all. You get from 65 to 78 actually. Anyway, also the fact that Romania has had a long beer making tradition does not impress me. But the fact that it doesn't have a strong beer making tradition yet manages to make fantastic beers does impress me. There are few types of beers in Romania compared to Germany, for example. Germany has it's insane. It has like fucking 860 different types of beers that everybody's all crazy about. But
just in one Bundesland.
Yeah, but it's just beers like Nene Yanku, beers made from oat, from barley, and these kinds of the different types of cereals are extraordinarily tasty. They leave this nice little residue, particularly Nene Yanku.
I'm still looking forward to drink the tax-free beer, #0taxi, that's the name of a beer, made by a friend of this channel, Mr. Bogdan Glavan, an economics professor.
Oh, make sure there's a bottle for me, man.
Yeah, and next time I'll be in Bucharest, I'll
We had it?
Yes.
Was it? No, we had...
Yeah, Ovidiu brought it.
Oh, Vidiu brought another kind of beer.
It's the same.
It was the citric. Oh,
It's the same.
It's the same beer.
You've had Zero Taxi before me? Fuck off.
It was the citric one. That one was really good.
Yes.
And then there was another chocolatey beer that was made by that. Yeah, the microbreweries in Romania, also the microbrewery culture that's starting to come up, is actually pretty healthy because it's very creative. People are very, very creative with the kinds of beers that they're
There are
making.
basically two reasons for that. One of them is that the microbreweries are also regulation-free most of the time, or at the very least not as bad as a big business.
Not as badly regulated, no.
And the second reason is because there is a surge in, not necessarily nationalism, but in the sense that, hold on a second, why are the Dutch brewing Timișoara? They don't know how to do that. They just don't. I mean, why don't they brew Dutch beer? Dutch beer is good, but they can't brew a proper Timișoara. So as a result, a lot of entrepreneurs started on this nationalistic feeling over the last 5 or 7 years, saying, no, we're going to do it the way we know it. And some of them turned out to be right. The market rewarded them. Some of them turned out to be wrong, and the market did not reward them.
Just chuck them out the window.
Yep.
And, I like the fact that there's no snobism about beer.
Not yet,
And,
anyway.
not yet anyway, but at least, the lack of snobism is nice. I can't stand it because as a chemist myself, as a person who is engaged in creating fermented products and understanding the process behind it and all that, most of the snobs have no fucking clue what they're talking about when they're saying, this wine seems a little bit less corpulent. And I'm like, dude, that's probably one of the most corpulent wines in the world. Because, it was, they left the grain from the grape in it while it was fermenting. And then they fermented it surly. If you do a surly wine, that's the more corpulent you can get. But it's not as corpulent. Fuck off.
Yeah, I have the same experience with the modern day experts in data security. I've been doing this for such a long time, and then they come and say, oh, but this is not secure enough. And I'm like, well, you hack it then. I mean, if it's not secure enough, then you shouldn't be needing more than an hour.
Oh no, it needs air gapping. Well, you know what? There's ways around that.
Yeah. Right, so these were the 10 or maybe 11, who knows, maybe we borked them.
Maybe we did 15, we don't know.
Is there anything further that you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
Yes. Trăiască România.
Right. So I guess with all of that being said, we found out the American critique and lauding of Romania. This would probably be the second or the third longest video on this channel, but that's okay. I guess with all of that being said, gib shekelim, visit our website, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.